Well, like what? What do you like? As you can see, I am by myself for the moment. Scott's armpit is just having a bit of technical issues. No, he's just swapping from his phone to his iPad or something. You know, boomers these days. But as you can see, the stream is accurately titled "The Inadequate Activist Professor Bawbaggamus Palmer." Simply revisionist history, and that's a fact, just as it is that Miss Thinning Lip is lacking lip. Whilst Mary Black gets off her tits, it's just a Kit Kat, you fascist prick. Whilst Angus the Bampot Robertson is after some bureaucrats with an arse to kiss, and that leaves us with the man, the myth, the redacted prick. I hope you've had your carrot sticks. No more light will be left on. Oh no, that is it. Enjoy the dark, you dick, Alan Smith. And if you do find your way home, fuck off. If you ring that door, I'm not answering it. See that, man? Fucking talented. I am a talented individual. The things I do to pass the time. I see if Scott's armor's back. It's like, he is. No photo though, man. You're letting the team down. No Bane photo. Come on, fuck. But
Ah,
in the chat,
sorted it, mate. Got it
we
sorted.
have Davy. We have Davy Boy there. Wee Davy Gnome. That's an Inverness reference that you probably won't guess. I don't know why I said that. Ragnar, as obviously I echoed Scott's comments last night, but he said it. I'll say it this time around. So hope you're doing well, pal. Obviously, if you're in the hospital, I don't know if you're out. Oh no, you did. You said down there, didn't you, that you're still in the hospital? But at least you're able to watch. You've got something to do. Hospitals are fucking boring. Neil Cairns, not sure about Baines, but Bam sounds about right. Oh, well, the individual that we're going to talk about tonight, he's a Bame, but he's also a Bam. Slim, how's it going? And I think that's about it. Well, there's 11 people watching. We'll see who's who. Hello, Scott Samra. Are you there? Bame 1 to Bame 2. Are you there? Echo Delta.
This is Bane Free coming in and shit.
Good stuff, Mike. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, well. So, I'm here too. Despite your accents, the sunset makes it good. The accents, no. I mean, this is one thing that I have to just put on the record here. I don't sound like I have a dulcet tone like the Ouija's, like, you know, Scott Sarber and Clyde Chance and whatnot, you know. I don't sound like them. They just sound like stereotypical Scotsman that you would fucking buy from a shop if there was a stereotypical Scotsman. So I don't accept that comment. Where's your BAME photo gone, Scott Scarber? Like, it just looks a bit bizarre. You've got no photo. Is he even there? Oh, it's just up there after a great start. See, none of these issues happen when I'm when I'm guesting on somebody else's stream, but when it's my turn to host a stream, I will go Pete Tomlin. Are you there? I don't know. But anyway, just while he's getting himself sorted, like, obviously, for anybody who's not aware of the thumbnail, it's Jeff Palmer, but it's not just him. It's more the group themselves with their slavery, Empire Slavery in Scotland's Museum report, and he's done what he always does. If anybody watched my Uncle Ben video on the guy, he always does it, where he seems to worm his way in with whatever it may be, and he then seems to bring up education. Always a section about education. So there were 6 recommendations that this group put forth for the government to inevitably accept. And I mean, anybody that pays any attention to Scottish politics will know themselves that in Scotland, every time recommendations get put to Nicola Sturgeon's government, they're always accepted. You know, it's just ridiculous. We have to go through the routine of pretending that they're sitting in some back room all debating about whether or not they can implement these these progressive policies, but it's just pointless. Just accept them the minute you get them, because you're going to anyway. But yeah, 6 recommendations, but one of them's about education. What the fuck's education in schools got to do with a museum? How do we go from talking about museums to education? Oh, that's because Jeff Palmer's involved. And as I've said before, and I always say it, I mean, it started off as a joke, but it's no longer funny because I've said it that often, but it's a point in and of itself. If there was a fire in fucking Tesco's, they would wheel out Jeff Palmer on STV News to say that fire wouldn't have occurred had they just implemented anti-racist education for nursery children and above. The fire occurred because Scottish people are uneducated about our history. Revisionist history, of course. That is Jeff Palmer over the back. The Velcro here, knob. But, aye. Are you there now, Scott Summer?
Can you hear me?
Aye. We can.
Quality. I don't know. They're just kind of a cut out there again for a fucking minute. But, you know, I'm not too clued up on Mr. Palmer the way that you are, but I have had a brief little snippet here or a wee quick read here, and he does strike me as a sort of chap that when you're out in the night out and you go into the pub and you're having a piss and you see the wee turd standing inside the toilet bowl that you want to piss away, that's Mr. Palmer.
Yes, the first time I heard of him was a documentary a few years ago, the Scottish and Black documentary, where the first one that came out with the guy from Rwanda who's now the new Doctor Who guy, and he was in that, and he was making it Scottish, so you know, fucking Scottish, like.
Oh well, don't be taking away his Scottishness from him.
Well, no,
you can't do that.
No, I'm not going down that route, like, but. But let's talk about the talk about ration fuel and power this winter. Did I see something about that earlier on today? I think it's I seen Nigel Farage's video. I've seen it on YouTube. Nigel Farage was talking about it. There's possibilities that there's going to be a rationing of gases or fuel, even power gas. But his suggestion in his video was obviously that we've actually got our own reserves of gas that we could quite easily be, you know, taken out of the ground, so to speak, and that could do us for the next 100 years. We're not going to do that, though. Of course, we're not going to do that.
No, but do you know? Remember a few weeks ago when I was talking about the monkeypox thing, and I says you watched them change the definition, and sure as fuck, remember we had this conversation, and then I showed you the article that they didn't want to call monkeypox because it could have went on to being an offensive term, right? Well, if you remember during the COVID thing that they were saying that BAMEs have to basically stay at home because they're more highly susceptible to getting it and end up in the hospital. You watch this, right? Come the winter months, they will start turning and saying, we need to make more gas and fuel available for ethnic minorities because they've came from a weather ecosystem that isn't as quite as cold as us. So we've got to make sure that the most vulnerable people in society have got warm homes this winter. You watch it, they're going to do that shit.
So I don't know. Someone's got to give, like, I don't know. You might be right. You've been coming out a few times with these predictions there, but now, as I say, like when it comes to the rationing, the only thing I've seen about it was this morning was that Nigel Farage. I think I fell asleep about an hour later, so I've not actually looked up much into it. But I mean, we've known for a wee while anyway that they're on about winter being it's going to get a lot worse come October time. They're on about like all the prices are going to spike around about October. It's a fucking joke. Like, you know, as I said before, you know, the thing that irritates me the most about the entirety of it all is it's all manufactured. It's not like this is all like just organic and it's out with our control. It could stop us tomorrow. It really fucking annoys me. You know. And the people that are pushing it, they ain't gonna suffer. I mean, even my mum today, she finally got a reading done on her energy bills and all that, right? And they've pumped up her, like, charging her for gas and that. And like the heating's not obviously been on really all year because of the summer and the spring and whatnot, but she's still having to pay like a ridiculous amount for gas. So she's moving to a different company now. She's had enough of them because they keep suggesting smart meters and all this shit to her on the phone. So she's had enough. So she's moving. But I don't blame her.
I don't blame her, mate. No, I'm too much mouth. You don't blame her, and see for a lot of people, you find that they don't need to use a lot heating, but it's the other things like the cooking, the day-to-day costs for the washing, etc., that shoots up through the roof. And for all the things that the Scottish government have proclaimed there the years, and it's good back as long as I can remember, about nationalising our fuel industry. And right now, you know, nothing's ever came to fruition, and they like to be pointing at the fingers about the energy companies and everything that the haunted politicians are doing. But through their own, it's not an ability, because they've got the ability to do things to make sure that this manipulation of prices is just literally cut. But again, you put all the eggs in the one basket, and politicians are all the same ultimately.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, when it comes to like petrol and that, I mean, about 80p of it each litre. It's fucking tax. You can stop that right now. You can stop it tomorrow. And again, I mean, all the oil, what's it called, Campbell oil field. There's another one. We've got our own oil. We've got our own energy. There's no excuse for that shit at all. But it's the way of it, like, all for sustainability and green energy, of course. Sustainability. And anyway, Jeff Palmer. So, obviously, I'm not going to spend too much time on this article, but this came out around about the same time as the announcement of the recommendations that were put out, which we'll come on to. But every article with this prick, he really annoys me. He really, really annoys me. But so here he is again. And there's every article with him, right? It doesn't matter. You type in Jeff Palmer, and every fucking article, doesn't matter if it's from 2017, 2018, 2019. I reckon if there's any images of this guy on OnlyFans or Pornhub, he'll still be holding a fucking map or a newspaper, because he does this to look intelligent, because he's called Jeff Palmer and he's got glasses. We're supposed to think he's a big brain. No, he's not. He's a fucking professor pretending to be a historian. Let's just get that clear. Fucking holding this map. Oh, what's he looking at? Oh, this is where my ancestors were enslaved. By your own people, dickhead. But we won't talk about that, will we, Mr. Jeff Palmer? But anyway, so Scotland's economy was built on the British Empire and slavery. Nothing to do with the Industrial Revolution. No, it was all slavery, of course. Honest to God. So, obviously, the slavery thing in question, this came in the back of George Floyd. Scottish government were on about a museum. They're still, I don't know where they're planning to build this museum. It might very well be Glasgow, but they're still on about that. But part of what they did alongside the museum that they want to build, that's going to be all about slavery and whatnot, was they have this little group set up, which Jeff Palmer chaired. So this is why we got this recommendations. But he's writing in this article here, and he goes on to say here, obviously, the parliamentary motion initiated Empire Slavery in Scotland's Museum as a project. I was incredibly pleased that the government committed to this in their parliamentary motion. It shows recognition for the lasting impact that the legacies have had on society in Scotland and a commitment to address them. The project has resulted in 6 recommendations made by the project steering group. The recommendations outline how existing and future museum collections and spaces can better recognise and represent Scotland's complex history as part of a national commitment to anti-racism. So he goes on to say that the recommendations mark a milestone in Scotland's tradition as a forward-looking nation. We seek to acknowledge the part we have played in shaping the world of today and are ready to see that glorious and inglorious history coexist, or histories coexist, sorry. Scotland is facing up to that reality. For more than 2 centuries, its economy was closely tied to imperial trade and conquest, including the enslavement of human beings, including my ancestors. And Jeff Palmer will have you believe that our ancestors just built a boat one day, and we seen Jeff Palmer's ancestors went, "Get on the boat, you big prick. Get in that fucking boat." That's what he would have you believe. How did we come into his possession of his ancestors? How did that happen, Jeff? You won't mention that part, will you? No, you will not, Jeff, because Jeff Palmer wants to have a specific type of selective and revisionist history implemented in museums as well as across the curriculum for all Scottish children to endure. And it's a revisionist type of history would have you believe that poor Jeff Palmer's ancestors, as I said, they were just noogied, beaten up by the white man and thrown into the back of a boat and taken away to be enslaved. We won't talk about any other form of slavery, past, present, who sold them in the first place. We won't talk about any of these things now, because we need to focus solely on the point of Jeff Palmer's ancestors. This is what this man's about, and that's kind of why this thing's been set up in the first place, because he's just full of shit. He's absolutely full of it, But I won't read too much more of this. We'll get on to the next part. But he says down here, people from all over Scotland were participants in and drivers of the British Empire, both at home and overseas, and the profits of these ventures helped to build the cities, towns, villages, and homes and infrastructures that are part of our society today. These legacies have a profound human consequence for all people in Scotland, developing and advancing racist and prejudiced views that persist today. And what's his proof for these racist views that persist today? There's not enough black people in Parliament, not enough black people working at Tesco's. Standard procedure from the anti-racists. Standard fucking procedure. You know, that slavery happened 400 years ago. Yeah, that's why there's disparities today. Nothing to do with the fact they're minorities. No, it's nothing to do with that. And it's all to do with the fact that we kidnapped Jeff Palmer's ancestors. Yeah, I just have to highlight that point because you're a revisionist prick. So I'll stop sharing for now. And I will probably stop ranting before I blow a gasket light. So, I'll get up the video because there was a STV piece as well that came out, and one of the women who, I don't know if she was part of the actual team or if she was working as like some sort of assistant, but she did an interview with STV News and did this again talking about this sponsored scheme from the government. So I'll get that up, and then we'll move on to the actual report itself, which is just, honest to God, man, it's race baiting. It's fine, it's like, but if you got anything to add to that, that's not bigoted, but make sure you pay your condolences to Jeff Palmer before you speak. Of course, peace be upon
him. Again, there's not really too much I could say. It goes back to the whole crux of it is every single time there's this conversation about the Western African slave trade, they always say European merchants purchased us as a people. Well, right, okay, so you've acknowledged that there was a purchase. So if the European merchants bought yours, who then did they give the resources or the finances or the?
Did he say
the fee? No. I'm not in that article, but they always use that terminology. Like when the merchants went down there, the merchants purchased them or the merchants traded them. So no matter what way you look at it, right? It just in general, in the general sense, there was a transaction that happened. So for these people to end up on the boats of the Europeans, and for the Europeans just to randomly, as you said, construct a boat and just end up pointing, see that bit of water right there on the coast on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. There's going to be 55 million slaves, by the way. We've got to go down there for the cargo at that time. These people, on a serious note, these people fail to actually look at A, who was in receipt of that purchase, and B, who was the ones that swarmed all these people together to put them on these apparent boats, to put them into the apparent other parts of the world that they did or they did not originally belong to. That's a whole other conversation. When you get the whole crux of it, it doesn't matter what way you want to wash it, whether it's white, Arab, Chinese, or whatever. The whole surrounding of African slavery started by the Africans selling the African out. Not the fault of the Scot, not the fault of the Americans, not the fault of the Russians or the Arab. It's the fault of the African people themselves.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. And that's what I'm saying, is the revisionism with this guy. I mean, he's not the only one, admittedly, but the fundamental difference between him and many of the other people that peddle the same nonsense in terms of revisionist history is that he's got his foot in the door in terms of government support and, you know, party support, etc. And he's got a bit of infamy, and he's able to sort of influence, or he's part of the team of BAMEs that help to influence education. And if he gets his way, and fundamentally they are getting their way, it will be their version of events that will be taught in school. It's not just a case of teaching, kids about the history of slavery, because it's not. It's like, I mean, before Europeans even set foot in fucking Africa, the Africans were being enslaved. And they never talked about the Islamic or the Barbary slave trades. No, we won't talk about that. We will only explicitly talk about the transatlantic slave trade. He even goes so far as to ignore like the Portuguese and whatnot that were involved. He just focuses solely on Britain. Why? Because he's in Britain. It's unbelievable.
But I'll say this very quickly, you could make the case though that if Mr. Palmer was that really set on, ending injustice, calling out a terrible act when appropriate, why is he on the streets of Libya right now stopping the slave trafficking of sub-Saharan Africans into Europe via Libya? Why is he on the streets of Libya doing that? Because he knows fine well if he tried that in Libya, he would be taken away. He knows that he's only singling us out because he's afforded the luxury of those freedoms to actually berate us as a people in our country, because it wouldn't stand for it back in Africa.
No, no, you're absolutely right. That's another thing. In fact, aye, you're right. They don't mention modern day slavery either. None of it ever gets mentioned. And then if you have the audacity to try and bring up any of the aforementioned, including modern day slavery, that's when you get, oh, are you trying to diminish what happened to our ancestors? No, we're not. We're trying to put it into context, or we're trying to show you inconsistencies. And the fact that there is inconsistencies, it says a lot. It speaks volumes, really, about these individuals. But this woman here, with her Bugs Bunny teeth, it's her that does the talking in this instance. But there he is there, front and centre, holding a book. Of course, holding the fucking book. It's Jeff Palmer. Of course, he's holding the book. Yeah.
Sponsored Empire, Slavery and Museum Steering Group today called on existing and future museum collections to do more to better address Scotland's imperial and colonial histories and embed anti-racism into public spaces. The group are also urging ministers to support the return of unethically acquired museum items to their original locations. We spoke to Abir Ladani, who's a curatorial assistant at Aberdeen University Museums. Abir, have Scotland's museums been failing?
Don't even say anything. Just before she says anything, bear in mind, she's Egyptian. She is Egyptian. So I want to let that sink in. It's like that guy in the stream yesterday standing in our parliament going on about Scotland's future is diverse. She is Egyptian. I just found it remarkable. I could never imagine this being the other way around, where you're standing in somebody else's country from from a completely different culture and racial makeup and whatnot, and you're standing there talking about ways to sort of shape their fucking education and their museums and whatnot going forward. It just strikes me as like, I don't know, like the arrogance, but at the same time, it just goes a long way to show how far as a society we've fallen when this is allowed to take place, funded and supported by our government and our media. Oh.
I think Scotland's museums have been doing fantastic work. It is just we need to do more work, and more work, particularly in the direction of anti-racism and telling all the truth, working hard to do more research on our past and reveal more of the history that has not been told.
So give us a rough outline of what has been recommended.
The recommendations are 6 recommendations. The first one is about a space to deal with Scotland's past regarding slavery. And also the most important, I think, is the organization that will look at that in more detail. And also regarding museums would look at their collections and do more research on the history of the collection, provenance research, and share this with the public so the public would know. And you saw the 6 recommendations that were published today.
And why does this matter?
I think it is more important. It's very important because it's part of our history that has not been shared with
our history. Do you know what annoys me? I mean, she doesn't really say it in this, but you probably heard it yourself. How many times have you heard these individuals or people like her make reference to like our history is too Eurocentric or it's too Scottish focused and it doesn't celebrate the history of the BAMES. We need to do more to celebrate the history of the BAMES. But yet, when the shoe's on the other foot, or you found the coin in its head, so to speak, they don't want to talk about, they want us to be browbeaten about the bad parts of our history, the atrocities we may or may not have committed, the slavery aspect and the colonialism, but we never ever talk about any of the atrocities or the empires of the BAMES and any of the slavery that they may have participated in. No. But they want, so on the one hand, it's too Scottish-centric, too Eurocentric. We need to celebrate and promote BAME culture and implement it in our history and all across Scottish society, because we need to celebrate the achievements and the positivity of BAMES, but we don't want to talk about the negativity. I find that remarkable. Again, inconsistency. But oh, it's the fuck, man.
You know, I'll say this very quickly. I think it's a bit cheap that this woman's talking about Scotland's role and what Scotland's doing or the lack of. Now, you pointed out this woman's from Egypt, right? And again, the Egyptians talking about slavery is quite funny within the saying, right? But let's just look at Egypt now very quickly as an entity, right? The human rights abuses that comes out of that country is absolutely staggering. Like, Egypt's an incredibly fucked up country, and the Meggie didn't. Yeah, and I only had dabbled back and forth with the Egypt thing because I watched an interview with that Majid Nawaz on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about when he was tortured in the cells. Well, he's fucking mad Islamic pals when they were tortured in the cells in Egypt, and he was talking about certain things. So I went down a wee bit of snooping about. But do you know, right, that see in Egypt a few years ago, mate, and I'm not even talking less. We're talking less than 10 years ago. Cairo, right, was voted the most dangerous city for women in the world, mate. Right? This is
Really?
this
I
is
didn't know
legit, mate. This is the scale of the moral and principality of this country that she's came for to come here and tell us. I think what this woman ought to be doing is having a right good look in the mirror, taking her 2 pence opinion, fucking off back to Egypt and trying to bring a wee bit of moral and dignity back in Egypt, because Egypt, as far as I'm concerned, is way above Scotland in terms of being picked apart on its character.
Aye, well said. Instead of that, she wants to sit here and she continuously goes our history over and over again. So I'm assuming she's got a bit of the magic soil fever, where she's no longer Egyptian and she's all of a sudden Scottish, so she can get away with that. I mean, again, it's like, imagine being in Egypt and standing there and talking about our history and berating Egyptians, even though the Egyptians that are there today aren't exactly the Egyptians of old. Like, we all know that, but like, still, the same principle applies. You can't, I can't imagine this happening anywhere else.
No, but again, it shows you where we fundamentally went wrong. It's this old buzzwords that you hear: equality and inclusion for all. At what cost? Because if you actually look at the way our society and the people that are telling us how we ought to be and what we should be doing, what we shouldn't be doing, have actually like really plundered us as a people in terms of our morality, our dignity, and really kind of shamed us into a demoralised state. And it's through their inabilities and their self-grievances amongst themselves as a people that they're taking it on us.
Yeah. I doubt, like, it's one of those things where, I mean, I can only really follow up by saying it just never ends. It never ends. I mean, we knew that this was inevitably going to occur at some point in terms of the Scottish Government announced that the projects were being funded, but it's just like they're being funded in the first place that irritates me. Like, it really pisses me off. I mean, I don't really know, try to look at crystal ball, hindsight, say the SNP weren't getting voted in every single election cycle and it was the Lib Dems or Labour, would it be any different? Probably not. But the only difference being that all these other parties, they don't profess to be, all for the Scottish people when it suits them. They don't get classified as nationalists by all the other opponents, but the SNP do. But yeah, this is the sort of shit they fund. It's remarkable. It's fucking remarkable. Well, anyway.
Public that has been obscured and hidden for many years, and it will add so much to our understanding of our history, and also it will hopefully heal a lot of the things that happened in the past.
And has Scotland perhaps been guilty of overlooking its role in colonialism?
Why do they do? Why is there always some white cuck on these programs? It was like the stream I did with Sensum last weekend. Right, and there was the guy, the guy that sits there and he's got the glasses for STV News. The one that speaks I speak like this really deep voice. I can't remember his name, but he was sitting there and he was like, what was it?
Are you talking about Colin?
Aye, but he was sitting there and he's like, we always get told to report we're all Doc Thompson's buns. The shit. Like, why are you fucking playing into their narrative? Like saying all these softball questions that allow to just sit there and go, well, I believe Scotland's gone backwards. Scotland's racist. Yeah, I totally think that's true. Thanks for asking me. It's a perfect question. I mean, fuck's sake, there's no pushback. They wouldn't dare push back. I mean, why is he saying that? Who the fuck's he asked that question on behalf of? Like, yeah, it's Jeff Palmer standing off screen, like. Graham Campbell standing there glaring at him with his Rastafarian hat on. I mean, what's going on? Why is he asking questions like that? Nobody's fucking wondering that. Did he come up with these questions himself?
See, when you look at STV, and you look at who owns STV, it's the same with the National. There's not an institution, media, publishing, anything remotely like that. It's in the mainstream that is Scottish, even though it have the Scottish name on it, or the national newspaper is proposed. It's been a Scottish nationalist newspaper. They're owned by essentially huge global companies that are based in places like Boston and Virginia. And when you look into these companies, they're very much like the extreme left-sided view of things. You know, your CNNs and MSNBCs, etc. So when you get nuggets like him asking these bullshit non-entity questions, that's exactly where it comes from, because he's got to there to do this to make it look like we're inherently guilty, to keep the schmucks that fund his job a wee bit happy. There is nothing remotely Scottish about STV News, sadly.
Yeah, well, I think you've said before, like when it comes to the Nationals, and I know there's an element of BlackRock influence there. I think you said that before. Did you know? Was it the National?
National as well.
BlackRock, and then there's a guy in the chat last night, but he was who did a bit of digging into some of these company or organisations that were providing resources for education down in England, the grotesque sex education resources, and lo and behold, BlackRock was one of the companies that he managed to find that a finger in every pie, finger in every pie. But when it comes to him there as well, though, like when it comes to people like the BAMEs and they get on to peddle this nonsense on the TV for people sitting at home to watch, like instead of any pushback or like controversial questions or just something that might kind of make, kind of give a bit of a, the other side of the argument, whatever it may be. No, it's softball shit that allows the conversation to flow. Very convenient questions, very convenient all the time, which kind of gives credence to the nonsense that a lot of them will come away with. I'm not saying she's not that bad, to be fair, in terms of some of the wankers that I've heard from the BAME activists, but by and large, she's still there to justify the nonsense with the museums. So it's still the same principle. But it's the softball nonsense allowing the conversation to just flow from start to finish. I mean, she could effectively, instead of having the screen there where she's wherever she is, she could hold the piece of paper, ask a question, and then run over and answer it herself. And then, there could be questions she'd overlap herself. You know what I mean? Fucking hell. Right.
I think it is important to look at all our past and highlight all parts of our past. And this,
but we're not doing that though, are we? Because we're only talking about our past, and it's selective parts of our past. That's the point. But
is the role of museums. This is what we do. It has been not been done previously, but I think this is the time to do it. And we have all the resources, we have all the information. We just need to do more research, reveal how some of the objects came to our collections, and hopefully this will make museums places for healing and places for telling the truth.
And how did you arrive at these recommendations? Who did you confer and consult?
Can you pause that? So, museums are places, and everybody knows this, right? But it's just to clarify, right? Museums are places where people go to observe parts of history, whether that be in parchment, whether that be statues, whether that be paintings, so on and so forth. All these artifacts are recorded in there so that people can observe, look at it, and see it for what it is. It's no there, as she says, for people to heal. There is no healing at museums. They're purely for educational purposes. And this is exactly what they've hijacked in the West, where they've took places of the utmost integrity for educational value and have turned it into places of feelings over facts. And this is only going to get worse the more that we pedal push this into a normal front. There should be no museum in any part of the world that should be even remotely considered to be described as a healing centre, because that's when the museum doesn't become a museum anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to wrap my brains around what the fuck she actually means by healing in the first place. I don't get that, because, I mean, it's the same sort of thing when they talk about, like, they want to implement anti-racist education, for example. Same sort of principle in terms of if they do that and then it can lead to a better understanding and we can achieve quote unquote equality. How are you going to achieve equality and a better eradicate the sort of differences or tensions that may exist between different racial groups by dredging up parts of the past, very selective parts of the past, to push, which is all predicated on political motivation. Like, so the same thing could be said about the museums. Like, the fact, like, I don't understand how this is going to be, how they can see this as a healing process, because they're going to have anything that's going to be in these museums. They want to have like stuff written, but like the true history, as you made reference to, the true history. Well, we know what that true history, the selective history. When the likes of Jeff Palmer's involved, it's not. I really struggle to see how there's going to be any healing. If anything, it's just going to create more division. It's going to piss off people. If anything, because you just think about it, you can kind of imagine what's probably going to be written on these placards and whatnot. You know, considering look what Jeff Palmer's already done around Edinburgh. He's got these placards and fucking statues, and every single one of them are a white man. Instead of pulling them down, he's got placards just essentially saying they're all racists. So what's he going to do in museums?
Well, this is the thing, mate, where you have an absolute minority who tries to act as a voice for the majority, because the thing is, it's all right preaching that there's racism, there's hate out there, there's people who have been wronged and probably know exactly had their case held, right? And we'll play devil's advocate with that for a bit, right? But at the same time, that is no a justifiable excuse to go in to a country to then hijack and promote a one-sided narrative because of hurt feelings. If he's saying that he's going to try and combat racism, the only thing that he's doing is a lone martyr, is actually causing division and hatred, and it's intentional because he's letting you know what he's doing. If this, for example, and I don't really want to get spicy on your stream, right, but what we'll say is if this was a person of a Central European country came back into museums based around the 40s and started trying to change things about that because over feelings that they didn't agree with, that person would be jailed. So what is the difference?
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. There is no difference at all. Absolutely no difference. But just this again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier on. It's a dominant indictment of our society. Really, that this is all. I mean, I know there's nothing that me and you could personally do, but just in general, that this is happening. It's allowed to happen. I mean, I know for the most part, like there's a lot of museums, and it's not exactly like everybody's cup of tea nowadays. Anyway, I mean, maybe for school tips and stuff, schools might take a class of kids there, but it's not like you're out with the missus. Oh, let's bugger off to the museum. It's not like it's like a day out type of thing. I don't know how much traction museums get, on a day-to-day basis. But that's kind of here nor there. Like, the point is, though, they're still allowed to get away with this, and it's all predicated again on the back of George Floyd. Don't forget that. All this is coming from George Floyd. Like, this is where this is all started. But I don't know. It's just, as I said, it never fucking ends.
A large number of experts, academics, the public as well, a large number of public has been consulted regarding that, in particular young people as well in Scotland who showed huge enthusiasm towards museums.
Oh, I bet they did. Considering that they're learning all the progressive talking points in school. They always do this, not just BAMEs, but just in general. There's always this smile appears on these activists' faces, and they refer to the enthusiasm that's being showcased by the youth. But they never acknowledge how that came to pass. They just say it so matter of factly, and they move on with whatever they have to say. And politicians do it as well. Thin Lips is very guilty of doing this. They all do it, really. And it really does irritate me, because the reality of the matter is, quote unquote, enthusiasm for museums and enthusiasm for what they're intending to do within said museums comes from the curriculum, because before, back when I was in school, if this was going on, I wouldn't have known about it, and if I did, I wouldn't have given a shit. Why? Because we weren't hearing about this sort of nonsense in school, so there would be no reason for me to show any enthusiasm. There'd be no reason for me to care. And in order to have kids to care, to show enthusiasm, you have to start to teach them about these things in the first place. And you can take that with anything, with climate change, with LGBT, with fucking feminism, or in this instance, with anti-racism. It really annoys me that they refer to the youth. But when we go into the actual report itself, you'll come to find that a lot of the youth that they're actually referring to come from the, what they're called, Intercultural Youth Scotland. It's a bunch of BAMEs, obviously. They're like, young, like under 24s, or their classes like young people, and they've come out with a few reports over the years, studies, if you will. One of them was classified by the Scotsman, because I covered it years ago, and it was, this groundbreaking study shows the extent of racism in Scotland. I went through the entire report that they conducted on a video, and it took me about 11 minutes, if that. And it was just anecdote after anecdote after anecdote. There was no proof of anything that they were claiming, and it was shit like, I feel that when I report racism to the teachers, they don't take me seriously. And then this was shown. That's harrowing. Oh my God, Jamal said that. It must be true. Like, I'm sorry. Like, but then they don't define what racism is. So for all we know, this is some sort of telltale that's going to the teacher every 15 minutes. Oh, my microaggressions are getting missed because Peter called me a dickhead, and I know he called me a dickhead because I'm BAME. And you might think that sounds like a ridiculous thing for me to say, but that's by and large where a lot of this stems from, because we're in a position now, especially in the context of school with racist incidents and whatnot, where literally and racist incidents, to define them, is any incident that the victim feels occurred because of racial prejudice. So I get literally a racist stare. I've heard that being quoted. That's actually quoted in one of the anti-racist resources. A racist stare. But, but let's just say I call somebody a dickhead in school and he happens to be a BAME. That BAME could go to the teacher and say, I called him a dickhead because he's BAME. That has to be followed up and looked into and investigated as a racist incident. It goes down as a racist fucking incident. It's ridiculous. But that's where we're at. Fucking unreal.
They have very strong views, and it's our turn now to actually live to their expectations.
And what would you say to people who might argue what happened in the past, it was a different time, it was different standards? What would you say to these people?
I think we need to learn about our past to be able to not make the same mistakes in the future. And also...
I'm sorry, what a cop. I mean, really? Really?
I would say this, mate. See that response as a cop-out, but here's the thing. She's like, we've got to obviously look at history so that we don't make the same mistakes in the future. Right? Fair enough. So... Britain, the British Empire, ending slavery, was that a mistake? Is that something that we should revisit? What part of history is she talking about? What is the cut-off point? Because if we're evaluating the whole thing as an entirety, then surely to God, it has to be for the day that it started to the decision of the day that it was ended to what's happened after that. We are allowing, obviously, the mass migration of people for the Windrush, etc., to come in, and then for the 70s and the 80s, the Bangladesh, the Pakistanis, and all the rest of it. So do we look back and go, right, okay, well, the slavery part wasn't very good. There has been perhaps a lot of people that have been disconnected from their ancestral lands, right? Okay, that's fair enough. The British obviously made that decision to end it. So there's been a lot of social upheaval and decadence within the Western world. So do we look at that and go, the only way to combat these changes is to uproot these people and send them back to their homelands? Is that also included? Because surely to God here, if we're being very thorough and honest with this, you can't have your cake and eat it. You have to look at the whole spectrum. Just know the bits that suits your argument.
Exactly. No, bang on, eh? And that's what, again, I keep making reference to select, not just revisionism, but so it's selective as well. I mean, I would have no issue. I think I said this to you on the phone earlier on. I'd have no issue if you want to go down the route of teaching the kids about slavery, but you put it in the context. You teach them about every form of slavery, and you also teach them about the attitudes of the time. The period, it was a different world back in those days. And then, but they don't want to do that. They don't even want to address the fact that it was different. Attitudes were much more different back then. No, they just want to focus solely on one little aspect of slavery. They don't want to talk about any of the aforementioned forms of slavery, like we were on about earlier on, modern, or in the context of history, obviously it would be like Barbary, Arab. No, we don't want to do that. We just want to talk about the British aspect of it. That's what annoys me. It's very selective. It's just, and as I also said in the phone earlier on, they do it with fascism. You always hear in schools about Hitler, and you hear about World War II and the rise of the Nazi Party. You don't hear a damn fucking thing about the rise of communism. You don't hear a thing about that.
It's the same way Tip. This guy, who was an absolute barbaric monster in every sense that you could possibly think about, was the biggest slave owner and mover of people in the whole of Central Africa. This guy, literally, if there was a slave that farted the wrong way in a back street, he would know about it. That's how efficient a network this guy ran for some amount of time. But yet characters like him and other slave benefactors like the Ottomans, certain part of the Arabs, and again, even modern day slavery, which is happening in Libya, totally goes out the window. So it's no slavery that I want to talk about. It's how, in their minds, white civilization in the Western world has built up to a point where there is no even a compromise with any part of the world. So the only go-to thing is to try and use a very weak and feeble, minute rationality in their head is, you've only done that because we somehow ended up at your part of the world, which is just all hocus pocus, and it needs to be called out for, quite frankly, what it is.
Yeah. No, absolutely, yeah. And then this all kind of goes full circle in terms of why part of the reason I want to start the stream in the first place, just for anybody that's tuned in late, because I can't obviously see the chat right now. It's the fact when it comes to the likes of Jeff Palmer, because they bring up the selective version of events that they wish to promote and talk about, and they use that as a sort of catalyst for the things that they wish to implement in the modern day. But they use that to explain disparities in today's society, and they use that to explain why BAMEs ain't doing so well in certain aspects of society. They tie it all back to the links of fucking slavery. So if they can get this narrative pushed and put into legislation, policy, education, and whatnot, that's a stepping stone to then start pushing for change now in the modern day. Equity, as they say. Fucking annoying.
We need to know about our past. It's extremely important. So this is what we are doing, and we are learning more about what happened in the past and learning more about the objects that we have.
There is a recommendation some artifacts be returned. Why is that important?
I think some artifacts has been acquired unethically, and these need to be returned. We have some experience here in Aberdeen. You must have heard about the Benin bronze that have been returned from Aberdeen recently. So in Aberdeen, we've been really active regarding that. And I think for objects to be in the correct place where they belong, I think it is very important. It's also important for the visitors.
I'm quite glad that she mentioned that point about things that have been obviously taken and are now in foreign lands, and it was unethical, and now they want to make a case for it to go home. So, in retrospect, again, when you're looking at this whole point of historical talking point and conversation, then if the artifacts are going home, that's fair enough, right? But see, for the people that don't have any ancestral ties to the Western nations in Europe and North America, then surely to God, there should be a genuine case to revisit that and say, do you know what? In the interest of unity and solidarity with these people, to get in touch and be in a place not only that there will be no question of systemic or institutional racism, but they'll have bonds and ties to a soil. Let's get these people back to where they're originally from. Let's see where their tribes are from, what part of Africa. Let's work with them so that they can reinvest and shape and build a better continent for their own kind. But that conversation won't hit the table because they know flat out these people don't want to go back there, which speaks volumes for a country and for a continent of multiple countries that apparently built up the West. Just think about that for a second.
No, you're bang on again. Yeah, in regards to returning stuff home, I've got no issue with that. Fucking take it all. But I find that remarkable, as you say, the way that they can say that objects belong to a certain patch of soil, but yet the people don't. That's peculiar. But also as well, I've seen it today that Germany have just sent a rake of stuff back to, I think, Nigeria that was taken unethically, if you will. Fine, take it all back. I don't give a fuck. Have it all back. If only that was the only complaint, the only problem we had. Fucking spear stolen from our tribesmen. But no, good point. Like,
to come to the museums and not feel that these museums contain stolen artifacts.
The report talks about the work that lies ahead being challenging and uncomfortable. Is that how you see it?
I think there will be uncomfortable stories, and we need to address these stories. We need to discuss them. We need to do.
do you know what would be uncomfortable? Would be to sit down a class in, let's say, Glasgow or Edinburgh, since that's where the predominantly is where most of the Muslims seem to reside. Sitting down a class of Muslims and telling them that I know that we've spent the last fortnight talking about the transatlantic slave trade, but Abdul and Abdul Jr. and the other Muhammads that all sit at that table, we're all now going to learn about your ancestors and why they were dicks as well. But we won't do that. That would be uncomfortable. That would be fucking racist. There's nothing uncomfortable about the shit that these people profess because they've got government backing and media support. The only uncomfortable aspect of this is the fact that, again, I'm going to keep bringing up the word because it's very common in terms of this subject, selective fucking history. That's what this is about. You're going to bring up stories that make us look like dickheads, but you're not going to talk about the context in terms of the time period, the attitudes that pervade, that permeate across society. But no, we will not do that. We will just talk about the fact that white man bad back then, therefore white man bad today. So hot take. Well done, DJ. You're on the money. No, that is really as simplistic as it gets. That's what it is.
No, I completely agree with you, mate. There's not really much I can say after that.
Just fucking does my nothing. But anyway, that's that. So I'll get the report up in a second, but I better have a wee gander at the chat, see if there's anybody there, 32 people. Jesus Christ. Getting more popular, like. Now I normally go every time I normally go back to check the chat, there's like people are dwindling because I've either rambled for too long or I've swore too much. I know people don't like the profanity. Well, not everybody, anyway. But what we got? Germany. What's this? Germany has sold their soul to the Russians. Oh well. I take it you're talking about the energy they still buy off them. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
Well, on that note, though, was it 2, 3, no more than 4 weeks ago, right? The European Union were talking about putting sanctions and stuff on Russia, right? And Germany pretty much delayed it so that they could still do last buys. And
wow.
Legit, mate, I seen all the fucking news, and I just thought to myself, that's totally beyond parody, because it took me back to the COVID thing where Italy, Spain and a few other countries basically went to the EU for more money to help with the PPE supplies, and effectively Germany and France told them to fuck off, but then increased their own budget overnight, and you're like, yeah, okay, chill. I'm genuinely no surprised, but the thing is with Germany, it's not just Germany that's to blame here. The French have got a lot to be done, and there's one country that always kind of just boggles the mind with me, and it's fucking Switzerland. Switzerland never seem to be affected by anything at all. They truly don't, and I just wish that our quote unquote weasels, because they're not politicians. Let's be deliberate. They're fucking weasels. I just wish they would take the Switzerland approach, because whether it's Russia or whether it's fucking Ukraine, just for one quick second, the two of them are pricks. Their government are pricks. They're fucking governed by the same people. There is not a dog in the battle that is worthwhile any us people in Scotland, England, Wales or Ireland for that fact should be backing. As far as I'm concerned, let the communists do each other and just let us live in fucking peace.
Oh man, I have seen a massive reduction in the amount of people that simp for Putin. It was quite bad when all this shit first started, but it's kind of died down a bit now. I think people are starting to see that there's this blatantly all manufactured and whatnot. But there was a point where they were like, "Oh, if only Putin would just invade the West and save us from the degeneracies." Are you fucking wise? Get grip. But that's stopped finally, or at least I don't see it very much anymore. but that doesn't mean that I'm by any means a Zelensky fan. I think he's a dickhead, and I think I think the whole thing that irritated me from the start. I mean, Russia's making so much money at this point, right? All these sanctions that they were imposing on them that were then justified in terms of making, like, helping to exacerbate the cost of living, quote unquote, crisis here. We're going to suffer a little bit, but don't worry, the sanctions will have their effect. How the fuck's the sanctions going to have any effect when the EU is still buying all this energy off them? I mean, come on, fuck. Well, it's a joke, like, it makes no sense. Like, we're supplying Ukraine with all this money and weaponry, and Russia's just sitting there, Papa Putin sitting there with his feet up at his desk, all this money coming in, like, he's loving life. It's just a joke. The whole thing's a joke. So anyway, but this is DJ Sonic. Oh God, see that thing that I don't know if you still listen, but that policeman thing he did that I sent to you to on Twitter. That was from him. That piece of McGarry. That was fucking quality. Oh, Jesus Christ! But he said history, like Islam invading countries and killing people. Well, that's right. For that to be history, it would have to be stopped first because the bosses are still alive. Well, that's absolutely true as well. But you'll never ever hear them talk about the history of the Islamic slave trade and whatnot. This is what I'm saying. It's just they don't want to talk about any other form of slavery, past or present, or any other atrocity, any other empire even. They just want to talk about colonialism, because I've noticed as well, I knew that the United Nations definition of indigenous, right, was effectively any group of people that survived alongside or underneath colonialism, right? So that effectively when you read between the lines, what that was doing there is making every single person across the globe effectively indigenous, and then that means that they could be protected by genocide laws. But who does that exclude if we're looking at it through the context of colonialism? Excludes white people, right? But I noticed something because I was looking up the definition of indigenous on dictionary definitions online, because I've got an old dictionary downstairs, and I referred to it in a video like a few years ago. The definition it's in there because it's like a group of people that originate from a certain part, like the sort of definitions you would expect. But I've noticed now all these different dictionary websites, just type in indigenous definition and you will see, especially on Google, quite often the websites, they've got two definitions now. They've got the same definition or words to that effect to the one I've got down the stairs. But the second definition makes reference to the exact same thing that the United Nations just make reference to, and that's that people living alongside underneath or alongside colonialism, survived colonialism. I find that very interesting that all the internet sources are now starting to update their definition of what indigenous is to exclude white people. Very fucking interesting, that.
No, again, but it shows you the true intent of the nature of the beast that you're up against. And one of the things that
from genocide protection, that's what they've done.
No, I get that, mate. But again, I'm not surprised to hearing it, because the only people, I'll give you an example, right? Now, there has been wars throughout the history of this world since day dot, right? There has been, you go back in other pages and you'll see it, different parts, towns fighting towns, tribes fighting tribes, cities, fucking country, continents, right? It's been nothing but literally war. However, right, the European people have been constantly reminded for X amount of years that the only two world wars to ever happen actually occurred in Europe. Like, yous all tied us into wars that we didn't want to be part of. And you think to yourself, you could call it a world war if you want, but considering places like Argentina, Bolivia, New Zealand, Chad, Burkina Faso, all these places were totally unaffected by it. Sure as fuck you can't call it a world war. It's literally just a European war with the exception of Japan and fucking America at best. But that's right. When you look at it for these examples right down through the years, it pretty much is just literally labelled at the European people, the Greeks, the Byzantines, the Romans. They even fucking add on whatabouties about the Romans' conquest in North Africa when they say they actually went down below the Sahara and were whipping people up left, right, and centre just to go back to Rome to feed them to tigers. Like, let's be, I swear to God, mate, I've heard that one before, but let's be real for 1 second here. I'm not saying that the Romans, during their conquest through Africa, probably did have a wee bit of privy, taking maybe a couple of people here and a couple of people there, but they certainly didn't feed, clothe, and water slaves hundreds of fucking miles just to get fed with a tiger at the end of it. That shit just didn't fucking happen. That's equivalent to people saying that people were turned into fucking lampshades, for fuck's sake. If we're going to observe history, and we're going to be having a rational, true, concise conversation, let's be factual on it. But when we're factual on it, we have to include everybody. But they don't want to have it, so that's how they've got to exclude themselves to guilt us in, to pull down our society, our ways of living, our morality and motivation as a people, so that they in their head thinking they're going to excel above us. Just slap that shit to the side. They will never, and I mean this respectfully, never achieve the greatness, the civilization, the agricultural advancements of what the European people has. They've just got to accept it because they're thousands of years behind.
Well said, man. Now, mate, that's two things we're going to have to clip out from you now. The one from William's stream, before it ends up getting yeeted or something. I'll have to clip that one out as well. I don't even know how to respond to that. That's one of those... I don't think I'll just leave it as it is. But, nah, totally agree, guys. But... makes me feel like a retard. I don't really know how to respond.
No, we just fire on to the next topic, mate.
Right. Okay, so this was the actual website, right? We'll get onto this, and then we'll go into the report. And then when we get onto the report, I'll let you take the photo for like 2 seconds. Like I'll zoom in a bit so you can read it out or whatever, because I do need to go for a pee. But I never thought on that. I should have done that before the stream started, but I am what I am. Anyway, so it says here that obviously this is the Museum Gallery Scotland supporting Scotland's museums, right? There's a rake of shit here that we could look through, but we don't really, that's here nor there for now. But anyway, it says the project sponsored by the Scottish Government, of course, presents recommendations from the Empire, Slavery and Scotland's Museum Independent Steering Group for how Scotland's involvement in empire, colonialism and historic slavery can be addressed using museum collections and museum spaces. As I said, it's not just about museums, because one of the recommendations, courtesy of Jeff Palmer, talks about fucking education. So that's what's irritating me about this. As I said at the start of the stream, there could be a fire in Tesco's, and that dickhead will guaranteed be wheeled out to make some sort of reference to the fact it wouldn't happen if they were taught all about anti-racism in school. The nationwide project builds on existing work from within the equality sector and from across Scotland's museums to explore the mechanisms of how Scotland can confront challenging histories with museum spaces. Right? So the recommendations are coordinated a national consultation with Intercultural Youth Scotland, I made reference to them already, and DIFLI partnership to establish public and expert perspectives for how Scotland's involvement in empire, colonialism and historic slavery can be addressed using museum collections and museum spaces. As a result of this project and based on the evidence gathered, evidence from Intercultural Youth Scotland, who use anecdotes, fuck off, the project steering group in June 2022 delivered a set of recommendations to the government. In developing the recommendations, the group looked broadly at potential mechanisms for addressing the legacies of empire, colonialism and historic slavery through collections and museum spaces. So we've got the consultation there if we wish to look at that, the press release, and here's the group in question. Here we go. Look at these lovely individuals. We've got the white cap at the back. There's always you have to have the proverbial white guy, but it's nice to, I mean, fucking Jesus Christ. Look at him. And there's Jeff Palmer. I know he doesn't have his book this time around. He must have left it where, I don't know, left it where he was getting his nappy changed before the photo probably. But here he is here, smiling away with his arms folded and presenting himself as if he's a fucking big brain. But I just want to state on the record here, he's not a historian in any capacity. Just because he's black, it doesn't mean that his lived experience transcends fucking hundreds of years into the past. He's a fucking professor. He's not a historian. And I know the video that I made on him just about a month ago when he was doing the same shit, by the way, the same shit, not the museum thing. Oh, no. We were talking about statues this time around. But the statue argument seemed to all of a sudden transition into him yet again talking about, this is why we need to have education reform. And if you don't think that Scotland's racist, look around you, and if the institutions that you work in and the areas that you live in, if they're not BAME and diverse, then think again. Like, fuck off, Jeff, you absolute wanker. But that's what he does. But here they are here. Just nice to know that this is the sort of people that are, dictating the course of action here. Really showcases that we're in charge of our country, does it not?
I think it's a lovely photo. It's almost
Oh.
like if it was a
An advert for
Pride
Uncle
march for the X-Men.
As I say, he's come a long way since the days of when he had to give up the long-standing.
This
job.
image is meant to represent Scotland.
Yeah, well, I suppose
So-
it does really. This is Scotland's future, is it not?
Well, I'm assuming as much because it's obviously on the MGS website. So you've got 8 folk there. 2 you could consider would be ethnically Scottish. You've got 6 who aren't. So
Yes.
again, you've got an overbearing minority, and they need to change something that works for the majority, which doesn't give a good, equal, fair representation at all. So right away, before you even read the report, we're off to a bad start.
Yeah, I know. And the thing is, though, even though we are the majority, technically, it's amazing. They preach to us about individualism, but yet all those BAMEs see themselves as a collective, even though none of them are from the same racial background. Really, well, some of them might be arguably, but there's only 2 people in that photo that you could make the argument are off for the same background, ethnically speaking, potentially, unless there's a wee hat component. Who knows? Probably is one. Well, it's not. There probably is, but
Davey said in the chat that hard behind Palmer on the left-hand side, some bit of gear. He wants you to zoom in their face.
all right, that's the one we just had the video of. Oh, Davey's got a wee his throbbing god rod. All right, okay, throbbing god rod moment. Like, okay, I'll get her up for you again, Paul. You have some fun there. Like, we'll give you a moment. There you go. Millennial Woes, eat your heart out, pal. Are you happy,
Oh,
Davey?
sake, man. Honestly, look at what's that ID in the eye on the left? That sees the crime before it happens, for fuck's sake.
Oh, fuck's sake. It's just fucking him. Look at him sitting there. You smug dick. You know what I mean? He should be kicking back with his feet up, right? The first black professor in Scotland. I mean, you give him credit where it's due. Like, he did something. He like the fucking first man on the moon. If you want to go to, okay, well, they didn't land on the moon, I don't think, but the one small step for man type thing. Well, one small step for the BAMEs. First black professor, Jeff Palmer.
Was he not the guy that done ITV News at 10 o'clock?
Trevor Phillips. I don't know. Well, he gets around that. It's possible, but I mean, as I said, he did have a long career with his face plastered on the side of stir fry fucking jars, as we know. Uncle Ben, I miss you, pal.
Well, I wonder how he starts his thesis. Does he just sit down in a dark, lonely room and in the beginning.
Well, I don't know how he starts his presentations, but I know how he enters the room. As I said, he's got a map or a book, and he's looking at it. He doesn't look where he's going. He's just looking down at it. It gives off the aura that he's intelligent. And if you're not convinced, as I said, look at that masculine arm fold. He might have a very saggy ball bag, but that's a masculine fucking arm fold for all that. There's testosterone still left in Jeff Palmer.
Look at the Chinese boy. He looks like he would literally be anywhere else than there. And the lassie, the Asian lassie,
this is exactly what he wants.
The Asian lassie in front of him looks like she's shiting herself, as if somebody's pointing a gun off it behind the camera. So many people don't even look like they want to be there. For
he looks like an ISIS hostage. Yeah, I mean. I'm like, what the fuck? I mean, I always make the argument, like, but the guys in the SNP and that, like, what is wrong with you? Like, why are you there? Like, can I ask the First Minister, like, how homosexual Scotland? Like, can you clarify? Like, what's wrong with you people? But when it comes to stuff like this, there's no political obligation for him to be stood there a fucking prat amongst a bunch of BAMEs that are dictating the course of action for his country. What's he doing? I mean, he must be hated live.
That guy straight up Joe Biden's body double.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Right. Well, here's the names here. So, Davey, if you're interested, we'll try and figure out who she is for you, Paul, because, I mean, I know that you might be. It's quite, I think it's quite remarkable, quite nice to see Davey. I don't know, Paul, which one it is. We can root. I mean, I think it's the one from Aberdeen, so it must be Abir Eldani. So if you just Google that, I'm sure you'll find some lovely photos. And if you're unable to, I'll send you the video of her on STV News, and you can screenshot that to your heart's content.
How does that sound, Davey? A beer fine and dandy, a beer old Danny. There you go, mate.
Egyptian
Who's that?
goddess.
So you've got Lewis, who signs
Lewis.
Kelly, and this dude here, mate.
Oh. We got Zandra Yemen, Lisa Williams, and you know the Lisa Williams is probably one of the babes. Alina Tremarchi. Right, we've got Churnjit Man, right, and we got Parvin Isaac. That's one of the Highland clan descendants. Just
There's a good, honest name, Steph Sholton. Good. That sounds like a very trustworthy name. Do you know what? This whole thing is probably honest intentions, mate. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that, you know.
All right. Right. Okay. The role of the NGS Museums was commissioned to manage the Empire Slavery Scotland Museum project. Recognises the impact. Again, they just keep repeating the same shit. So I'm not going to waste my time doing that too much. Nothing else really to see here. So we'll just get to the actual report. And as I said, I'll see what I can do here, because I do need to go and alleviate my soul and my bladder in a second. But in terms of zooming in, because it's one of these things, it's on 2 pages type of thing. But here he is. Here he fucking arms. Look at this fuck. Oh, right. Okay. Right.
Well, look at that. Man's looking dapper in it with his threads.
So look at him with the arm folded around the leg. Like, I mean, Jesus Christ. That might be too wee. No, actually, that'll do for now. So I'll zoom out a wee bit so you can see a bit more. I'll only be about. Well, that might be too wee for the chart, but can you see that all right? Or do you need a bigger?
No, I can see that fine.
Right. So, well, I'll leave you with that for like 2 seconds, because I do need to toilet. So if you want to read that out, or I don't know.
It's fine, mate. I'll keep it going while you go away.
Hey, Badger, I'll be 2 seconds. Well.
Yeah, no worries, mate. Okay, so it says here, before you read these recommendations, I invite you to take a moment to recognise this milestone in Scotland's tradition as a forward-looking nation. We seek to acknowledge the part we have played in shaping the world of today, and are ready to see the glorious and inglorious histories coexist. Well, in terms of your history, it certainly is fucking glorious, isn't it? You need to be ashamed of it. Scotland is facing up to the reality that for more than 2 centuries, its economy was closely tied to imperial trade and conquest. Well, considering there was large parts of Glasgow, places like Blantyre, Hamilton and beyond, that were effectively all fucking tobacco fields, I think, that actually brought in huge revenue to the city, Mr. Palmer. I think that was a little bit disingenuous, but hey ho, we'll leave it there for the time being. Including enslavement of human beings, people from all over Scotland were participants in and drivers of the British Empire, both at home and overseas. Well, that's true, since Scotland was part of the Empire. That's just like totally stating the obvious. That's like turning around and saying you're wearing a white shirt. Don't know which to begin to do that, fair enough. And the profits of these ventures helped to build the cities, towns, villages, homes and infrastructure that are part of our society today. These colonial ventures have profound human consequences, developing and advancing racist and prejudiced views that persist today. So, you could make a case, though, that Scotland's inventions and discoveries over the last 200 years, things like penicillin and fucking all this fucking technological advancement has been done after, I'm assuming he's making a case it's been done after slavery, because out with the the conquest part, there is nothing here that absolutely screams out to me, we done this because of Africans. However, this project marks a landmark in our collective work to recognise and address these legacies. However, it will be clear from the recommendations that further work is required. The project steering group recognises and honours the work that has already been done in Scotland to learn about and acknowledge its colonial, imperial and slavery histories and how they continue to impact all our lives today. We hope to increase the momentum of this work and understand that whilst this project relates to the museum sector specifically, the impacts extend far beyond the museums and heritage and relate to the social justice and to society as a whole. So, Mr. Palmer, my question would be to that then, when you talk about legacies and obviously increasing the momentum to understand things, why aren't you and other people talking about the clearances in Scotland, or the Scots being sent after Australia, or the fact that Scottish people couldn't wear their own traditional attire in certain parts of Scotland because it was outlawed? Certain Scottish flags are still outlawed to this day. Know that we're making a case to try and sound anti-union or anti-English or whatever, because these things happened hundreds of years ago, right? But why is it the case of people of a land far, far away literally have to be implemented in our own education system, when in our own education system we don't even acknowledge and recognise the damage that's been done to us from other forces and other people outside our fucking borders? Why is it acceptable because of the colour of the skin of someone else that our history has to take a backseat on this?
Yeah.
That's a question that I would raise. Are you back?
Well, did you not see me moving the fucking screen like?
No, sorry, mate. I'm trying to look at the chat and read at the same time.
Right,
See if maybe the question has been put.
Um,
But the thing is, mate, is like this is just a lot of waffle, really. I mean, you could even turn around and make a case like I'm no best with English history, but like the English were literally invaded by other people. You know, you had the Normans, you had the fucking Vikings, and all the rest of it. You had the English folk that were shipped off to Australia in the fucking North American continent as well. So are we just meant to just say, do you know what? See, our history, our identity, our culture, we'll just take all of that out the education system, right out the museums, and just implement it with absolute hogwash to make people of, with the greatest respect, inferior cultures feel better about their mishaps and their inability to build up a decent civilization. Because again, all these things that's been talked about, when you look at the inventions that came out of these formations that helped shape the world, these were literally done in workshops and fucking people's houses. This wasn't the fact that somebody went down in fucking blood diamond mines in Africa and brought them out here. This was done by honest intellectuals, hardworking people that's actually made these fucking lands prosper. Nothing about the African continent can lay claim to that. That's a fact. To suggest that is absolute bammery, misleading, and sheer lies.
Exactly. I mean, they make the argument in America all the time, like with the slavery, obviously in America, they'll make reference or bullshit. It's fictitious in nature, but they'll make claims that like that America was built on the back of slaves. Like it wasn't just caught and they were picking. They were building the Empire State Building and whatnot. You know, right? You can't make that claim here. They weren't fucking here. And it wasn't fucking Baines that were coming up with all the inventions that gave Scots their name back in the day historically. You know, the Scottish people, a long time ago, admittedly, a lot of intelligent individuals came out of this country. A lot of inventions come directly from Scotsmen. They didn't come from Baines. Nothing remarkable came from the Baines really back then. Okay, that's partly because they were enslaved. I'm not saying that'd be a dick, but I'm saying this is what they do though. They've taken so much of this stuff from America, copy and pasted their nonsense from over there, and they're trying to apply it to countries where it doesn't really work effectively. Even the arguments are like white supremacy and all that shit. Like they're starting American universities, and now they're just copying and pasting it here. It doesn't fucking work here. We didn't have that issue. But here it is. Here I'm trying to make a rollie, but just this is what I'm talking about because This is what I'm saying. You see it straight away, right? I'll skip the paragraph, but he says, from the onset, the steering group acknowledged that that central to this work is understanding that racism is a consequence of our history and is part of our cultural landscape in which we exist, and thus damages us all. And while the priority for this project has been to amplify the voices of those who've experienced racism, the implementation of these recommendations will help to improve the ways in which Scotland's museums and galleries interact with all their audiences. Right? And he makes reference to the 6 recommendations, and he says, which reflect the steering group's hopes for how Scotland's museums can address the legacy of historic slavery, yada yada. They have been shaped in partnership with the museum workforce. Fucking hell. All right, wait. Is there anything else to say there? No, I'll go up to the next bit, the next page on the right hand side. But this bit here, you're already seeing segments, like a wee sort of. It's a bit of insight as to what he's doing here, what's kind of hidden beneath the surface. This isn't just a case of teaching about history. It's to kind of showcase the harrowing plight that they all had to go through with their selected version of events, obviously. But it's to then, if they can say all the attitudes, the racism, etc., all that shit that happened back then, that's still happening now. All the things that we claim, it's all happening now. Do you believe us now? The microaggressions, we don't get hired for jobs, and the hiring practice is discriminatory. There's not enough BAMEs in Parliament, and it's all because of that racism that we're all teaching you about now in your museums. See what I'm saying? There's an element of that, like, and it comes through time and time again with this guy. But I think there's a white paper. There should be a page on the right hand side, I think. He says up here, wait. A fundamental issue. Oh, here we go. Right. 2 seconds. I've still got a roll in my hand here that I've not rolled properly, but a fundamental issue was highlighted by consultation undertaken with BAMEs. They stressed that for many BAMEs, not only are museums part of the cultural landscape of racism, the cultural landscape of racism. Fucking hell. What are you fucking here for then? Blame your parents. Don't force you here. But then, anyway, not only are they part of the cultural landscape of racism, but that in their current state, they are contributing to the problem. Yeah, this is what we're dealing with here, folks. It's high intellect, high IQ, hot takes from the BAMEs, of course. It's contributing to the problem. What problem? What problem? The landscape of racism. Do you care to define what that is? Do you care to give some examples, or are we just supposed to take this at face value because they say words? Okay, what all that like? This has eroded the relationship between BAMEs in Scotland and our museums and galleries, leading to a lack of trust. And mistrust is a serious societal issue. And there are ways that institutions can address this. Transparency, a willingness to admit and learn from mistakes, and a commitment to working together can support the development of these relationships. The recommendations in this report offer a chance to develop understanding through education. There we go. And to build trust. So, education. So we're gone from museums to a reference to education. Okay. Starting a practice where Jeff Palmer is concerned, obviously. Enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there is a statement that everyone has the right freely to participate in the cultural life of the community, to enjoy the arts. The report and the recommendations of what comes next aim to ensure that this progress can be achieved in Scotland. A single museum or exhibition that tells stories is not enough to support important change. Structures need to be embedded within institutions to support museums and galleries to reflect modern Scottish society. See, that goes back to what I said earlier on, if you remember, where I said so modern Scottish society. So obviously the inclination there is that it's too Scottish-centric at present. It's excluding BAMEs, so we need to talk about things that we can do to celebrate the BAMEs, or if we can portray them in a light that exudes sympathy, that's fine. But we will not address any negative things from their past. No, we will not do that, because it's all about white man bad. Yeah. And then it says the work that lies ahead will be challenging and uncomfortable, but it will be worth it. Right. So anyway, we'll get to the nitty gritty in just a second, but I'm trying to make my rollie now. But can you see the chat? All right.
I was just about to check it, mate. Sorry, I was just getting a glass of water there. Do you know what I think is actually absolutely brilliant, right? And it's not brilliant for the right reasons, it's brilliant for the wrong reasons, because it's absolutely ironic that when you talk about, you know, all these things, it's like there's been slight progression, but there's still a racism out there, right? But you look at certain parts of Africa, still to this day, right? There is ethnic hatred and racism all across many countries in Africa. You've got like fucking the Bantus, the Pygmies. As I said, you've got people being sold off the streets of fucking Libya. You've got Nigerian tribes murdering Nigerian tribes. They're not allowed to marry. There's like claim that some sects within Nigeria actually class themselves more Nigerian than others, strangely. Don't know how that fucking works. In other parts, you've got women and children of the Dinka tribe that are literally just being snatched away, mutilated, sexually abused, murdered simply for being Dinka, which I think is a tribe within a country in Africa. You get the point. So what fundamentally, right, if they come to Europe, right, and they go, oh, Europe, man, like Britain, Germany, Scandinavia, Italy, Greece, all these countries are so inherently racist, then why is it perfectly fine to sit back, turn a blind eye, and no condemn the ethnic racism that happens within that continent amongst our very own people? If they can't be tolerant to each other and fix the problems back in the continent, they've got a whole the biggest continent in the world. They've got it all to themselves. If they're so intolerant to each other in the biggest landmass in the whole fucking world, why is it acceptable to go out with, come into our land and tell us we're inherently evil because it's savage back home?
Because it's another one of those things. In order for them to acknowledge that, like the things that racism or ethnic tribalism and whatnot that occurs where they descend from, in order for them to acknowledge that, it then sort of pokes holes in the sort of narrative they're trying to portray here, and that is that we're hateful. We created racism before we created the concept of racism. Before we decided to take it upon ourselves to be dickheads to everybody, everybody got on just fine. That's the sort of stuff that they can't acknowledge. Like the quote racism of old is just a sort of, it was a modernization or a modern form, if you will, of tribalism. But I mean, but this is what they do. They do it with things such as in-group preference. I mean, now that a lot of them are trying to claim that that's a social construct that we made ourselves, but by and large, tribalism and whatnot, in-group preference is a thing. It's just a thing. You prefer your own to a certain extent. I know that whites, they're a little less. I don't know if that's always been the case, but I know over the course of the last 30, 40 years, there's a less of a sort of how is it worded? There's a sort of less desire to be with your own kind, so to speak, in terms of like the other groups. They're very, very, very conscious of in-group preference and whatnot. But that's a normal thing. But they don't address the fact that it's normal for every other group. They just focus on us. They pinpoint it on us, put us under the microscope, and then they'll point to these things that nobody actually takes into consideration, thinks about, because it's just normal. But they address it, they highlight it as a problem for us, and because nobody actually thinks about it, it puts you on the spot. If you know what I mean, and then we're like, oh yeah, shit, yeah, you got a point. But then that's where the little argument will come in. Well, this is a racist concept. You prefer your own because of unconscious bias and shit like that. No, it's a natural fucking thing that people have.
Well, that is the thing. It is a natural thing, and we can look at that with many different fronts. The Chinese, the Japanese, the fucking Amazonis. Hey, in fact, when we actually look at it, I can't remember David Attenborough ever doing a documentary and going, what we've got here is a penguin riding a tiger. It doesn't happen because in-group preference is a normal, it's a healthy, and it's a very common trend that's been happening for well over a millennia. But again, what you've got to address, the point is here is, what is the need to change? What is the need to change that? Because if it's still being by large part practiced in countries like Japan, China, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, India, a lot of countries that predominantly are of the West, then how can you have one part that seems to be very upholding, the other side of the fence has to be very degrading?
Because
I just
I would say these things aren't happening over there, though. You know, like they're not being targeted with the same shit that we're getting. You know.
no, that's a very fair thing to say then.
You know, like fucking. There isn't strings being pulled over in like the deep dark parts of Africa and China and whatnot where they're being browbeaten for the most simplest of natural things. You know, it's just fucking us. And then every single thing, like, oh, you do this and you think that way, that's racism and that's unconscious bias. That stems from historic oppression and whatnot. So they're trying to make this completely, they're trying to deconstruct every fucking aspect of us, you know. And I mean, this is one of these things where they're useful idiots in many respects because this is, but these individuals, they're political, racial activists. I'm not disputing that. This is coming from higher above. The ideologies come from somewhere, you know. They're just fucking parroting it.
I seen something. It was filmed some time ago, but I literally just seen it a wee while ago, and it was a conversation between a Chinese person and a black person.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're about.
And I think I showed it to you, mate. But for the people in the chat, just for a bit of context, like the black person was sitting. And they were basically making an excuse saying the British done this in their country, the Europeans have done that in my country, the whole of Africa they've done A, B, and C. And the Chinese person effectively laughed at them. And the Chinese person pointed out that through the period of history when the West were going out into the world, they went and left a lot of things behind, a lot of infrastructure, a lot of things that were laid onto these countries. And by and large, a lot of these countries took on these infrastructures and these methods that were being put in place for them in parts of these countries, and in some cases, whole countries actually flourished. And the Chinese person was kind of like mocking the African person for their people's inability and failures to actually grasp on to the adaptation that was led for them to actually excel as a people. And it's one of the most funny things because it's nothing that's degrading, it's nothing that's too demeaning. It's just simplistic for a very neutral optic perspective. And the African person was literally clamped and shut down. They just never had a counter for it. And that's one of the very few things that lives with me, because when you think about all the things that was left behind, a lot of these modern technologies that were put in, even in the Middle East when they were shown how to fucking get oil out for the fucking water, these people have been on, built, flourished, and the Middle East has became a bit of a, by and large, there's some nice parts in the Middle East, there's also a lot of ancient parts, but for a lot of the infrastructure that was left in Africa, you're the only example that you can get that can come close to it out with South Africa was when Rhodesia was actually flourishing. The rest of the place is a shithole because they never adapted, they never lived up to anything. And again, it comes down to that complex. It comes down to that inferior complex, whether it's the inability for them as a people. They don't have that motivation. They don't have that drive. They need somebody there to nanny them as a people with the greatest respect to do. Because time and time and time and time and time again, it has been shown to be true. You put them in their own continent, you put them in America, you put them in Canada, you put them in Australia, you put them in Europe, you put them in Russia, you put them in Argentina, Brazil. It's the same fucking thing every time.
Yeah, and that's probably that's one of the elements though that makes me feel sorry for them in some respects, because they are political pawns. You know, they don't realise it, like, but they just get fucking used as a stick to beat us over the head with, no matter where they are. You know, political pawns. I mean, all the years of the foreign aid that they've been pumped, billions of fucking pounds been pumped into that continent, and it never goes to where it's supposed to go to. And as a result, certain parts of the country, you know, under fucking tyrants and whatnot, it's just you've just seen baby booms and poverty's never exactly got any better in certain parts of it. Yeah, there's certain areas that have sort of developed a bit, but the grand scheme of things have not really amounted for very much. But the argument to that would be it's because they've got no resources left because of fucking the pillaging from colonialism. Yeah, they got every angle covered, like every fucking angle. But I'll just get past this bit, right? So I'm not reading all of this gibberish here, but there's just a few things. So the anti-racist organisations, activist artists, historians and curators from communities who experience racism have been pushing for Scotland's museums to acknowledge Scotland's role in imperial trade, colonial conquest, and to recognise the contributions of those from ethnically diverse backgrounds. So I mean, they recognise, this is what I'm saying. So they want to recognise the contributions of people from diverse backgrounds, but they never want to talk about anything that they did that could be considered negative. No, you won't. No, of course not. Again, very selective. And the fact that they're being selective, that's inconsistency. And inconsistency kind of that goes a long way to show the true intentions behind Jeff Palmer's little stunt here. And then it says this bit here. I've made reference to this before because this comes up quite a lot, not just in this document, but just over the years, like all the time. It's all empire, colonialism, slavery, and migration. This needs to be taught. They would throw in the migration part. Now, obviously, I'm aware of empire, I'm aware of colonialism, I'm aware of slavery, but where does the migration aspect of it kick in? Like what the fuck are you talking about? The demography of this country, the demography of the UK, by and large, unchanged for the most part, bar the invasions you mentioned earlier on, wasn't full to the brim of diversity from its inception. It's not. So what are they talking about? The only thing I can think of is either that justifies modern day immigration, which it doesn't really, but that's an argument that you sometimes hear. Like, oh, well, the immigrants are moving freely to the UK because of, empire. You hear that all the time. Or are they alluding to revisionist history, where they're going to start saying they've always been here? I don't know. I don't fucking know because it's never really elaborated on. And then it says it's a national project. Obviously, it's kind of rehashing stuff that we covered already. I don't need to read that So this project focuses specifically on museums, but a wide range of individuals from beyond the museum sector have been consulted as part of the work. This connected approach is key to understanding and moving forward towards racial equality. You mean equity, but we'll say equality if it suits you. And integrating the range of expertise which exists in this area. The terminology used for the purpose of the report is used in the glossary. Fine, whatever. Okay. Do we need to see anything more here? Oh, here we go. Actually, this could be right. The findings support around almost 5,000 people from across Scotland have fed into what is the largest national study of attitudes to museums and racism undertaken in Scotland. The findings support the clear need for Scotland to address the legacies of empire, colonialism, and historic slavery within the museum space and through museum programming. The evidence further confirms the significant existing body of work on racism in Scotland, which makes it clear, here we go, that racism is structural and affects people across their life experiences, with discrimination being 3 times as likely for those from a BAME background as for those from white ethnic groups. Okay, are we going to get any elaborations on what they're claiming here? And how do any disparities against always fucking disparities, but a disparity exists because of oppression or discrimination or some form of racism, always the same shit. This is what I'm saying. This is what they do. This is what they always do. Yeah, slavery from 400 years ago. Yeah, that's why there's disparities, but they don't say disparities. They'll say discrimination. Scotland feel, 22% of people in Scotland feel that there is sometimes a good reason to be prejudiced against certain groups. And racial hate crime remains the most reported hate crime in Scotland. Reported being the operative word there, okay, but they do make reference to charges. 9 charges being made a day. Okay, 9 a day. Do I have a calculator nearby? Like, no, I don't. I need my phone. 9 a day. I don't know how I fucking feel about that. Like, I'm not sure about that one. But even if we do go down that route, that's true. Is that all white on BAME? Or is there any other way down? I don't know. But 9 charges a day?
That works at just over 3,100 cases over a year.
Fuck, wow. It doesn't sound like that. Well, in terms of population size, it's still a bit difficult to believe, but if that's what they say, that's what they've said. But normally they don't actually refer to the charges. It's normally just the reports. Yeah, that's because that's more hard hitting. Because at the end of the day, the minute a report is made, that gets put down as a report, obviously, and shit. And it's quite a complex process before it actually gets to a charge in court. I suppose because a charge, if I remember rightly, there's as I said, there's a very complex process before it ever actually gets to the procurator fiscal, and then you end up in court. So that means that the charge comes before you go to court with the procurator fiscal, or they're referring to post procurator fiscal. I don't know. I'd have to look it back up, but it's a very complex process because I remember making a video on it a few years ago. It's not as clear cut as you do something and you get done for it. It's a bit more fucking complex, as I say. But anyway, I'll take them at their word for that. Whatever. The contemporary context of this work is crucial, with the pandemic exposing significant inequalities in health and social outcomes for BAME. Social outcome again. I mean, what the fuck? You know? There's plenty of people in this country that are poor, living on the bones of their arse, or Scottish, just as well as BAMEs, you know? But the difference being, though, there isn't groups put in place to help them specifically for being Scottish. I mean, they've even got that in the Scottish Parliament. They've got the ethnic minority fucking expert advisory group that was set up explicitly to help BAMEs through the pandemic, and it was put. They had a rake of recommendations that were put into place, showcasing the inequalities that have been exacerbated during the pandemic, and they were coming away with nonsense such as in racism from childhood racism. So they literally said this, words to this effect, that if kids experience racism, little babies experience racism in school or whatever, that was internalized, and then that actually had a negative effect on them as they would grow up, which could actually make them more susceptible to the coronavirus. That's what they fucking said, by the way. I'm not even joking. I swear to God, hand to God, that's one of the things they said. But there were some of the recommendations that were put forth was obviously what was it? The curriculum got brought up, curriculum reform and all that stuff. I don't know how the two are compatible. You know, we're talking about COVID. All of a sudden, that's gone from COVID. Problems from COVID. They didn't want to address, vitamin D deficiency and whatnot. None of that shit. It was all racism and oppression. The usual trait, but it seemed to transcend into recommendations that were geared towards reforming our curriculum. Go figure.
Can I ask you something?
On you go.
See if you lived in a country, right? I'll just say, in a hypothetical, you lived in Tanzania, right? And Tanzania was an incredibly bad place to live. You were getting victimised for absolutely everything. And then just happened to be that there's people from all Scotland, from John O'Groats to the fucking border, custom building wee dinghies to come to Tanzania. Would you be like, oh, come on, this place is great? Or would you be out there losing your shit telling people, do not come here? This place is fucking evil. It's a hypocrisy at all. I mean, on one hand, right, when you look at the generations that have came here for the influx with the Windrush and the early Asians coming in and building up their communities, these people have come out here, so their children have grown up with free healthcare, free education, access to many different forms of sport, access to many different museums, and all-rounded better life in a nutshell, effectively, right? So you've got early last number of years, these people coming out of the woodwork telling us we're inherently evil, the country's balls, everything about it's absolutely shit, but yet they have no absolute intent on down to Dover, standing next to the likes of Steve Laws, and telling folk, don't come to the land of milk and honey. This place is incredibly evil. They will kill you. Do not come. They know they know their argument is a sham. It's just our tolerant line is now at the point where they have more than enough, so they want to take it off for themselves. And this is just basically the last subtle that they're trying to get at, because in reality, they know with the freedoms that they're afforded to spout that pish in our country, the freedoms that they're afforded to be platformed in our country, the more of them that can come in, the more of them that they have the numbers game, the more of them that they can actually force us into a point of leaving, forcing us into a point of being intimidated, forcing us into a point of relying on them. That's exactly the whole crux of this. And this piece of piss, what we're reading right now, is just aiding and abetting that whole consensus.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I always point to it, but I'll just say it really quickly before I read this paragraph. Right, a good example to use all the time is their constant obsession with proportional representation, because obviously the way that works is obviously people in the chat will know probably by and large, but anyway, it doesn't. If in the context of the 2011 census in Scotland, 4% non-white, so that would mean that they wanted 4% of teachers to be non-white. 4% of the parliament should be hypothetically non-white. Right? That sounds all right for the time being if you buy into their shit, which the government do. You know, they kind of, they're towing that line. But as that percentage point increases, in terms of, say, the next census, when it comes out and it's, say, 90% white, so therefore it's gone up 6% to 10% BAME, that would mean 10% now the teaching workforce has to be BAME. 10% of parliament would have to be BAME. You know, every institution that holds any areas of power, these areas would have to have a reflection of whatever it said in the census. So as time goes on and the generations come and go and the abundance of immigrants come into the country, that percentage point's always going up. We're not getting any bigger. Now it's been done to increase our population, and we're fucking shrinking. And that's going to be reflected because it's proportionate representation. And it sounds namby-pamby the way that it gets worded, but realistically, the fucking red flag should be going off like, or alarm bells even, because that's a power grab as far as I could tell. They know exactly what they're doing.
100%.
Exactly what they're doing. But this bit here, look, so it says the context of this work is crucial. The coronavirus part that I think I read, but it's not coincidental, sorry, that this increased awareness of global inequity, so we've gone from inequality to inequity straight away, has emerged at the same time as international pressure to recognise that Black Lives Matter and renewed interest in re-examining our shared history and the culture, the cultural myths that have shaped Scotland, Britain and Europe. You know, it's fucking brilliant that the likes of Jeff Palmer could come over here from Jamaica and he's going to tell us all about all the myths that have shaped our nations. You know, that's fucking great. The big brain, Jeff Palmer. You know, as it's recognised in a review of Glasgow's International Festival, COVID has made it inescapably clear that we live in an interconnected is a very key word there, because that's a sort of turn of phrase that you hear being coined all the time as we move towards our sustainable global citizenship-esque world. Is it not? It's not a word that I used to hear being thrown about very often, you know, even 4 or 5 years ago, but it's something I hear all too often these days, even from our own First Minister. So there's that part. So we can get past that now. The recommendation should be nearby, I think. See what's here. I mean, Jesus Christ, there's a lot of stats and whatnot here. Well, I don't need to read it all, obviously, like, but let's see what this way. The museums. No, this is about respondents. I'm only reading shit about respondents if I can avoid it, really. The values of inclusion, participation, ownership and equality are essential to everyone having the opportunity to take part or contribute to the cultural life of Scotland. The consultation within this project also shows the voices of people who experience racism and are currently being erased, marginalised and excluded from museums. And again, talking about historic slavery, right? So we'll skip that if I can avoid it, because there is quite a lot of waffle in terms of making references to, you know, consultation, which I'm trying to avoid for the sake of time, etc. But more the recommendations themselves, as opposed to page after page after page, kind of repeating the same nonsense about what it's going to be providing us with, instead of, when I just get to the point. I don't know why they waste so much fucking energy typing out page of the page of the page, and it's more or less just explaining the concept of, well, this report will do this, then the next page, this report will do this. Just get the point, you know. But did I see racial? Oh, wait a minute, though. Something caught my eye there. There was further evidence that museums would need to engage with how the legacy of the British Empire and its colonial activities is perceived globally. Additionally, the consultation has indicated that museums need to be supported to build their racial literacy. Racial literacy. Oh, well, that's again, well, we all know what racial literacy, well, I assume people know. It's critical race theory. It's not anti-racism they're talking about. If they're making references to racial literacy, they're not talking about anti-racism anymore. They're talking about critical race theory. So that's important to take note of, I would have thought. Develop the knowledge and understanding, and it's essential to enable museums to build trust. So again, key consultation finding with the collaboration with schools. This is what I'm talking about. Schools. And this is the whole point of this stream. From the start, you'll know, anybody that's tuned in late because I can't see the chat. The whole fucking point of the stream is the fact that Jeff Palmer, he's doing what he always does best, and that is that every project he gets involved with, he manages to tie in reforming education to push shit in schools. It does not matter what project it is. It's by and large normally the same nonsense in regards to peddling stuff about BAMEs, but the point is, though, it always ends up with at least an element of the conclusion being around school reform. And there it is, a reference to school already. It's deemed essential to ensure that the next generation are empowered to learn from Scotland's legacies. Racism remains a serious issue in Scotland's schools, with bullying based on race reported as the most frequent type of prejudice-based bullying. Scotland's young people were particularly vocal about their support for museums, making an active commitment to work against racial injustice and discrimination. Now, obviously, we don't have any statistics as to what this is. I'm not going to dispute that it doesn't occur, but the same thing occurs when the minorities are the majority, if you know what I mean. I'm pretty sure I've seen it being mentioned in other charts and whatnot. I know it's hand to mouth anecdotal, but is that not anecdotal what we're looking at on the screen anyway? So I can say, if they can say it. Plenty of people that were white growing up in majority non-white areas, and they got bullied in school, or they felt outnumbered. They were made to feel like shit. And then there's obviously that horrible story, that wee boy in England that never gets a mention from any of these anti-racist types, the wee boy that killed himself in primary school. He got bullied for being white in a predominantly Pakistani area. Yeah, it happens both ways. I'm not saying it's right. Of course it's not right. Bullying in any capacity is not right. But you can't eradicate it. They'll just pick on somebody for something else. If it's no that, if it's no skin colour, if it's no race, it'll be something else. Ginger, big ears, big head, wee dick, whatever.
I think, see, a lot of issues like that, though, right?
Yeah.
I can't speak for all cases, but I do know this with some, at least in the sense of Glasgow, and I'm not mincing my words, I'm not pulling any punches here, this is just truth. There is many aspects in Glasgow in certain schools now where the bullying's absolutely horrendous, and by a large part it turns out that it's whites are often the victim, and the schools are giving these kids basically more than enough chances to try and, wind their neck in, change your behaviour, be good at school. But instead of punishing things accordingly in own behaviour where it's merited, the schools are often defending the position of the bully, where they're trying to use the school as some form of rehabilitation centre. In many aspects, the parents aren't interested, because what they do is now, and they never done this when I was at school, usually when I was at high school, if there was an incident, you would go to your teacher. The teacher would then refer you to your guided teacher. The guidance teacher would then work with you in a one-to-one with that individual. If that never really smoothed out, then it would be referred to the head of the year, then the head of the school, and so on and so forth. There was never ever a parent sit down. It was always one-to-one with the pupils, or they would get the parents in to see if there's anything that they could do in terms of additional support. Nowadays, they don't do that. What they do is they get the parents in, and effectively, the bully parents just go, "Oh, not my child. My child does not do things like this. No, my child, very hard. You're just being racist," right? So now the schools find themselves in the back foot right away, where A, they find it very difficult to suspend and expel pupils. 2, if they do try and go through those channels, they're dealing with cases of racist accusations against them. And 3, in a lot of aspects as well, some teachers in Scotland, right, when they actually confront this, are actually being challenged, in some cases being attacked by the pupils. So bullying is never okay, but by a large part for what it was when I was at school to the way it is now, it's gang warfare of colour, and the schools don't have the spine nor the ability to do anything about it because their hands are tied by the Scottish Government, at least in that respect when it comes to Glasgow schools.
Yeah, I've heard a few things being mentioned in the Parliament, and I've seen it on some of the articles that I post on Telegram and that. There's been a wee uptick, or there was an uptick in abuse and violence directed towards teachers. But I mean, admittedly, I was quick to judge, and potentially my judgment might be correct, or it's my unconscious bias, who knows? But I did think to myself, it'd be interesting to know where these incidents are occurring, which part of the country, because it's not the sort of shit that I used to see in school. And when I was growing up, and obviously I grew up in fucking Afghanistan and Inverness, so I never seen any of that. Yeah, there was the odd guy, including myself. I grew up to be a bit of a prick in high school where I would talk back to that teacher, but I never seen myself in a position of attacking a teacher and whatnot. So to hear that there's been an uptick in teachers getting assaulted and stuff like, I did wonder where that was happening because they never made reference to it. So like, well, and I'm hearing that from you there, like, for fuck's sake, but Jesus Christ. But I better have a wee gander at the chat at one point, like, or can you see it? I mean,
Aye.
I don't know who's still there, if there's anybody, but anyway,
we've got 19 people, mate.
Right, okay. There was well, I had it when I last looked. There was like 30 odds, so we're losing our core base. I suppose when they're looking at a wall of text, it would put most people off. But at the heart of these recommendations is the understanding that Scotland's museums are not only record keepers but change makers and cultural influencers. Interesting, and are key to moving society towards racial equality. And there's something here as well. The recommendation set a suggested approach to transform how museums engage with the histories and contemporary realities of 21st century Scotland. And this always gets referenced, irrespective of which topic. And I wholeheartedly believe that the reason that this always gets a mention now, it's not just a case of, this is current day, therefore we'll make reference to 21st century Scotland. No, I think that's a play on words because obviously we're headed, what's been implemented all around us is Agenda 21, so that's why they keep fucking saying that, if you ask me. But where is I? The creation of a new organisation dedicated to exploring the subject and changes to how existing institutions operate, right? And then this bit here, to confront and explore racism as a legacy of empire, colonial, historic slavery, blah, blah, and anti-racist change must be delivered across all museums. Recommendations 2, 3, and 4 outline the changes that museums should make to accelerate, operative word, and support this work. This includes include integrating anti-racism within their organisations, building a relationship with the community, and telling more complex, nuanced narratives about Scotland's past. Nuanced my arse. They're nuanced as they are. Progressive. The Scottish Government, recommendations 5 and 6 look at how the government can further support this work through aligning museums with adaptations to the education sector, designed to combat racism, and through setting out a progressive approach to engaging and returning collections that have been unethically acquired. Okay, we get another paragraph telling us what the document intends to do. Fucking mental, but I think the PDF's the same these days. It's not like so much fucking type. Summary of the recommendations. This might be where they actually are, which would be helpful. White people minimise our stories and culture to just slavery. People of colour are more than that. And who did he quote? Somebody from Intercultural Youth Scotland. What did I say earlier? This is what all of the reports that I said that the Scotsman referred to as groundbreaking. It was shit like that. Okay, that might very well be what the person who wrote that or said that might believe. It doesn't make it true, but that's enough for it to be presented as truth. What the fuck? White people minimise our stories and culture to just slavery. So you fucking talk about it. So anyway, here's the recommendations. So we got recommendation 1 is Scotland should create a dedicated space to address our role in empire, colonialism, and slavery. Recommendation 2, museums should ensure anti-racism is embedded in their workplaces and public spaces. 3, museums should involve the people of Scotland in shaping their work through co-production to promote cultural democracy and participation for all. What? Number 4 is museums should commit to research, interpret, and share the histories of Scotland's links to empire, colonialism, blah, blah, blah. Number 5, museums should support efforts to promote and embed racial equality and anti-racism in the curricula, get us education, in a meaningful and effective. What did I say earlier on about Agenda 21? Oh, well, lo and behold, there's another wee throwback to it, I suppose, in a sustainable way. Number 6, Scottish Government should demonstrate their support for restitution, repatriation of looted or unethical acquired items in our collections. So, as I say, curricula. Fucking annoys me, really does. See what we've got here. Are you still there,
Aye, no, mate. I'm just
can't see.
letting you do your thing, mate.
I mean, I'm trying to scroll through it to get to more of the stuff about education, and I don't want to read through all the waffle to find it. I mean, I do have it highlighted on my phone, like when I posted the Telegram a few weeks ago. So if I need to do that, then I will, because I don't want to read through all this fucking stuff, because I don't really give a shit about the museum aspect per se. Let me see though. I suppose if it's number 5, recommendation 5, there might be. But there was other references as well that I highlighted on my phone, so that, because they mentioned global citizenship, I'm pretty sure, and stuff like that in here at one point. But so what have we got here? I mean, I can scroll back up if I need to, but I'm just trying to find the museum should involve people. We'll come back to this stuff if need be. 4, share the historic links to Empire. Let's see this. What's this one? People in Scotland should be empowered to explore the legacies of empire, colonialism, and slavery through their museums. To support the museums, should research, interpret, and share Scotland's historic roles. Is it roles? Historic and contemporary links to empire, yada yada, and critique false and misunderstood narratives. People across Scotland should be enabled to understand how historic events connect to life in Scotland and globally today, including how racism and inequalities today connect to systems of empire. Let's see, in fact, this is exactly what I'm on about. So when it says Scotland and globally today, including how racism and inequalities today connect to systems of empire, colonialism, and historic slavery. How the fuck are the two connected? Well, because of disparities. This is what they do. They're not the same thing. Disparities don't exist because there's anything holding them back. There's nothing in our society, legally speaking, that holds these people back. And in fact, the opposite is true. You know, there's paper after paper after paper that's been implemented into our legal system that prohibits anybody from being discriminated against on the basis of race. So what the fuck are they talking about? People in Scotland should be able to, or should be enabled to understand how museums work, including how stories are told and how collections are held. To do this, museums should be supported, should be transparent about their process, processes and ways of working, sharing knowledge gaps and historical biases. Museums will be encouraged to value and integrate all types of knowledge and experience within their approaches, and to recognise a value of both lived experience and of professional experience of understanding and interrogating race and racist structures. Okay. I'm going to have to look at my phone in a second because I probably have skipped past that and I shouldn't have. But let me see. Number 5. Yes, so here we go. Well, education definitely needs to be addressed. Like so, people in Scotland should be empowered to understand the legacies and impacts of empire, yada yada, at every age. Every age, yeah. To enable this, schools and learning practitioners should embed an understanding of how these legacies have shaped present-day racism across all educational establishments in Scotland. So we've gone from talking about museums to educational racism. I mean, what does that even mean? I don't know. I don't know. I don't fucking know. Schools, universities, and higher education establishments should provide learners at all levels with a range of opportunities to explore these histories and the ways they impact daily life in Scotland. You starting to see what I'm on about here now?
Aye.
I mean,
it's just I don't want to get too ranty about it all, because I think if I was to get ranty, I'd probably rehash a lot of the points that I've already said. I'm just really looking for fresh hypocrisies, for things that I've not seen yet.
Yeah.
So if I'm quiet, that's exactly why it is, because I'm just trying to read everything that is on the screen.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, as I say, that's why I've started skipping through stuff, because I'm noticing that they're repeating themselves a lot. But it's like I do think, again, it's by and large the education stuff. Like, I mean, you know, one thing I do find somewhat remarkable though is the fact that they're making recommendations for stuff to be done on the basis of anti-racism reform and whatnot in the curriculum. But these are already things that are coming into practice already anyway. So it's almost as if they're advocating for either an acceleration in that process or additional, stuff to be implemented or considered. I don't understand that. I mean, we've already had the SNP's manifesto in 2021. We know this, right? And then we've got all these projects that are taking place in the background. The building racial literacy shit. right? So for them to come out with a report in 2022, they're a bit fucking late. But I don't really get that. Every time one of these PDFs reports is released, they make recommendations or they hearken to things that are already occurring. So
but I think that's done deliberately though, because see when they get the foot in the door when it's initially implemented, then they can turn around and says it's an aiding tool, mate. So when they get that out of the line and it's enacted, then they can say, well, we've got all this literature to now build upon that. That same already got their foot in the door. Now they can fully implement and grow arms and legs with it.
Yeah, no, you might be right. And as well, it keeps it as a political talking point if they continue to repeat it as well. Right. Aye. So where was I? Fucking school. Did I read that whole paragraph? I can't even remember now. Museums should work closely with learning practitioners to share these histories and to promote and embed race equality and anti-racism in learning environments in meaningful, effective, and sustainable ways. In learning environments. And remember what I referenced about 2-3 minutes ago. All ages. I mean, so they're very vague. They didn't elaborate. So what are we supposed to conclude from that or take away from that? Does that mean early learning all the way to fucking your mid-40s? I don't know. But then it says why Scotland needs to do this. So the consultation strand indicated that museums should work closely with the curricula. So our education system, our academia, targeting our youth, right? So anybody that's in the chat that's got a child, when this shit's sort of geared at your kids, whether or not they're age where it'll affect them, or maybe they're old enough to bypass this nonsense. But the reality of the matter is that's by and large what it's targeting. It's targeting the youth, And who's it going to benefit? Well, it sure as fuck isn't going to benefit Scottish children, is it? None of this toxic nonsense does. It's bile. It's absolute bile. But anyway, the curricula providing different perspectives and narratives through which to understand the world. While many heritage organisations work with schools, museums are not currently embedded within educational structures and are not deeply involved in curricular design and implementation. Schools, museums and galleries across Scotland should be supported to connect with work to explore the continuing global impacts of empire, colonialism and historic slavery. Okay. And to support the development of meaningful... Oh, well, look at that. Yeah, look at that. Wow.
It's your favourite every time, mate.
Yeah, I do like to see that quite a lot of people now make reference to global citizenship now, but it's when you start looking into what that actually entails in terms of what they teach kids, it's fucking disgusting. Really is. I mean, the normalization of immigration, that's one of them. Normalizing diversity, social justice, racial equity in general. So a lot of things are tied up under that lovely little bow of global citizenship. So we've got here as well. I need to zoom out a bit. We got.
See that point? It says that. See the point? I think it might have just been a wee bit up. It says that museums should prioritise.
Was that before I scroll back up?
I think so, mate.
Oh, you mean this bit here? Down here somewhere?
At the right-hand side.
Oh, yeah, all right.
Museums should proactively prioritise the development of resources with a focus on the legacies of empire, colonialism, historic slavery, working with the central government, education bodies, local authority, education leads, schools, where they can, but recognising it should not wait for educational institutions to initiate this work. So effectively what they're saying there is what you had played earlier on in the stream, where museums are becoming a hub for healing. So we're putting feelings before historical truth, before proper recorded history. So effectively, museums are going to be used as a central tool to utilise that and implement it, and more so that with that last part right there, but recognising that they should not wait for educational institutions to initiate this work, which means that museums, by and large, are going to be the ones that are going to be initiating this at the forefront in basically being the crux of the spider's web of all this. And this is all going to be through the schools, through the nurseries, through the colleges, through the universities. They're healing centres. They're not educational centres. You seen that at the start of the stream. This is what this is telling you here.
Yeah, and then there was, I can't remember which page it was on in this document, but remember when I read the part where they were on about that museums are going to be change makers, etc. I read that out earlier on. And there you go. And
Yep.
the third paragraph there answers my query that I had about 5 minutes ago, where it says that museums should work to support, mirror, and accelerate already existing anti-racist work. It's happening in and beyond the education sector. So what I was on about, there you go. There's that answered for me. Thanks for that, Jeff, pal. I knew you had my back. But I'll just go up here just to see what they say here. The government should recognise the importance of and help facilitate closer work between museums and educational establishments, including helping to broker relationships. The government should develop approaches to enable the integration of museums as part of the Race Equality and Anti-Racism in Education programme, which, by the way, is the part of the Building Racial Literacy programme that stems from that curriculum reform. Oh, fucking hell. Exploring and promoting the contribution that they can make to decolonising curricular policy and practice. The Scottish Government should engage with networks of learning practitioners and experts from across the globe, supporting schools to connect with museums, galleries and schools internationally to explore the continuing global impacts of empire, colonialism. Oh, fucking hell. This work should be done while being aware of power imbalances and seeking to address these. And how do you address a power imbalance? We obviously need to level the playing field, so you need to redistribute power. You know, of course you do.
But then again, you could make the argument here, right? Well, the Scottish Government has probably been the most liberal, centre-focused of minorities since Assembly's been built. So when they're talking about a power imbalance, who's the power imbalance actually against? Because if we're going on proof of the pudding with all the actions and the things that's been implemented, it's certainly not against minorities.
No, it's not. But the way that I've come to understand when they talk about power is they'll look at, say, for example, in the context of just Scotland, they will look at Holyrood, and because Holyrood is predominantly white, they see them as a block of people, one group, and that means that whites across Scotland have power, institutional power, because the Parliament's white, right? That's not how it works, of course, but that's how they're treating it. So in order to sort of obtain power or make things fair, they then in turn want to, let's just, as I say, the context of Scotland, they would in turn want to level the playing field by having black people or just BAMEs in general in Parliament who would in turn have some semblance of power, the reins of power, and they would be able to do what they need to do for their own people. The difference being, of course, that the whites that are in Parliament aren't there, and we're not all part of some fucking collective block, and we have institutional power. They don't work for the majority of people. They work for their voters, of course, some of them, if you will, but they don't work for whites as a whole. But the BAMEs claim that's the case, so when they get into power, that's exactly what they will do too. That is kind of how it seems to work. I hear that quite a lot from their attitude. I mean, I might not have explained it coherently enough, but that's, if you, maybe you got the gist, maybe you didn't. But did I make sense?
I know. I kind of get the point that you're making. Again, no, the language that's used within these articles is all very telling. But if, for example, see that this is where the whole privilege myth is pretty much debunked, because if a Scottish person was to write something in support of aiding and strengthening Scottish identity and Scottish people and Scottish values on a draft like this and trying to get it into an educational curriculum, trying to use this to get into Parliament, people would shut it down. People would call you dangerous, would call you every name under the sun, and it would be put to bed. They would call it a power grab. You'd probably be labelled a white supremacist. But
Yeah.
here, because on the basis of somebody else's skin colour happens to be different, it's been, put through as a proposition for better learning and better understanding. It's just, I think a lot of people who might come across this that sit on middle ground ought to look at the context that's behind the language.
Yeah. No, don't disagree. To be fair, wait, I'm looking at my phone here because there's a part of page 33. We've not got that yet, but fucking hell, it's a wee bit of time. Culturally diverse. I've read most of that, right? So I'll zoom out a bit because, I mean, as I say, some of it we don't need to go through. Like, I realise cautious the time as well, but can I get the feeling? Wait, no, I need to go down now. As I just noticed, there it is again. Fucking thing, I swear to God, people really need to start, like, I mean, this building racial literacy, I'm hoping eventually people start picking up on it, like, because this new organisation that they're speaking of, as it makes reference to here, the new organisation should establish and sustain strong links to education and plan to develop resources for schools, higher education institutions, right? But they then they say down here, I just noticed that, luckily I did, that they should support museums to work closely with learning practitioners, and a subgroup should be used as a basis for continuing and expanding a network around those who are doing anti-racist work in education on museums. They should use existing mechanisms to support museums to develop closer links with schools. Museums should work with Education Scotland and, oh, look at that. Look at fucking that. Building racial literacy program, the critical race theory program. It's cropping up everywhere now. It really is. It's making more and more appearances. Eventually, there will not be a way for the Scottish government to sort of bury this, because for the most part, barely anybody in the country knows about this fucking program. And if they have heard of it, all they get told, they get fobbed off with nonsense about it being simply about promoting anti-racism. No, it's not. It's not at all. They're two separate things, because anti-racism in and of itself is somewhat grotesque, but that's merely the doorway. That's like the doorway into the realm of critical race theory. And that building racial literacy program, that's reevaluating all the definitions of words that you thought you knew, and then introducing you to new topics. If you know, the redefining racism, etc. And then that's where the narratives start to come into effect of the systems themselves, the country. Everything's predicated on systemic barriers and whatnot. And then you get the arguments of whiteness, and it goes on. Obviously, people are aware, but that's the building racial literacy program. The fucking boot who runs it, obviously, the white tears thing that I've talked about 1,000 times before now. Anyway, they should work with external partners and relevant experts to develop guidance from museums on how to develop anti-racist resources with education, anti-racist resources again. They work with the government and other partners to support Scotland's museums to connect with schools internationally to explore the continuing impacts of empire, historic slavery, yada yada, on a global scale. So as I said, they're using museums, as you say, as a sort of spider's web, but it's like it started off as a report that was supposed to conjure up recommendations for museums, and not only are they sort of redefining how museums are going to operate in the future, but they've used it as a segue to yet again talk about things to implement in academia. And then they even allude to they're going so far as if certain institutions aren't taking it upon themselves to implement what needs to be implemented, they'll take it upon themselves to just do it themselves. And they want the government to sort of greenlight it, which they will. That's the problem. This is the stuff about loot, so we can skip that shit as well. I think we're nearing the end now, actually. Can't have the Queen of England's crown in my country, so why can you have mine? Fucking take it and piss off. Glossary. Oh, well, look at the glossary, though. So we got BAME, anti-racism, BIPOC, colonialism, cultural democracy, curriculum, decolonisation. How do they define that? Historically, the word decolonization, has referred to the political process, including varied forms of anti-colonial resistance that ended direct colonial rule. In this context, decolonizing is about people subjected to foreign domination actively taking control of their lives, territory, and institutions, as well as their cultural and national identity. Today, decolonial thinking and practice recognises, despite UN resolution in 1960 that declared the necessity of bringing colonialism in all its forms to an end, nearly 2 million people worldwide still live in non-self-governing territories. Decolonisation is also widely used in non-political contexts, including in museums. It's not simply the relocation of a statue or an object. It's a long-term process that seeks to recognise the integral role of colonial mentalities in museums from their creation to the present day. Okay. We've got duty bearers, whatever the fuck. Race is a social construct, it says there. Yeah, this is what we're dealing with here. It's a social construct. It's not scientifically supported. However, it's an impact on people. It's very much a reality. This is what it says. We got up here ethnicity. Empire, of course, is where a central or main power rules over the other territories. Imperialism is a term that related to this, usually meaning the creation and maintenance of unequal relationships between nations. British Empire was a system of dependencies. Yada yada. Historic slavery. Selective revisionist historic slavery, of course, really, or let's see what they bring up here. When referring to historic slavery in this report, we are distinguishing from more modern forms of enslavement. Historic slavery includes chattel slavery, a form of slavery in which the enslaved person is legally classified as a piece of property rather than a human being belonging to the owner. An enslaved person under this system has no rights, and they remain enslaved for life. Any children born to an enslaved person is also enslaved for life. I'm not disputing that it's good attest in its nature, but again, they've gone out of their way to exclude every other form of racism by focusing on chattel slavery. Mm-hmm.
It's very convenient that they've done that.
Yeah, selective, as I say. But you guys, go on. If you, I might have interrupted you. On you go. Right?
No, mate. Sorry, I coughed just prior to that. That as again, there's not much else that I could really add to that. It's just it's come to be expected, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. Coming to the end now.
I will say this though on the museum points. I can 100% see this now, that when these get enacted properly within museums the way they want to do it, you watch this, children will be taken to the museums. It'll be compulsory school trips 2 or 3 times a year. It will fucking happen. They'll make sure it will happen.
And they'll provide resources as well. That will just get added to the fucking myriad of the resources that are already available, for schools to adopt. That's a fucking joke, man. So we've got racialized. The concept of racialization refers to the process by which a group of people is defined by their race, which is in quotation marks, obviously. Repatriation and restitution. Rights holders. Structural racism. A system in which public policies, institutional practices, representations, and other norms work in various, often reinforcing ways to perpetuate racial inequality. Well, that's great and all, but, it doesn't exist, so you just waste your time typing that up, really. It doesn't exist in Scotland anyway. Unethically acquired. Just fuck off. Just see if we've got anything else here. And then it's just, I think, we've come to a close, really, on this. So, I think so, anyway. Yeah, because it's just all the sort of links at the bottom. But my point to that was, obviously, you've seen it started to come into fruition the further you went down that, how it was all linking into schools. And that was the whole purpose of me finding this irritating to begin with. It wasn't so much the nonsense about the museums themselves. Even my post on Telegram, when did I actually post that to Telegram? I can't remember. It was about a month ago almost now, to be fair. But it was about the education aspect that's irritated me, because it's the same every time Jeff Palmer is involved in a project. Always about education. But I just think it's malevolent, it's deceptive, it's devious even, But I don't know. It's never ending, as I've said. It really is. And I don't know who's still in the chat at this point. I haven't looked for some time. 14 people now, Jesus Christ. They're very quiet now, like. Have I bored everybody?
No, mate, not at all. It's just I don't want to say something that I've just already said. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't want to become one of the guys. It's just like rehashing things. I think you probably got the best of me earlier on in the stream, because a lot of the stuff that was just kind of fresh. It was me seeing it for the first time. But again, I think this whole concept that's been trying to be implemented with the museums taking the forefront and basically just being given the reins to do what the fuck they want, even if the education departments for the schools and the nurseries and colleges haven't began initiating the process for it. The museums are just basically going to steamroll it in place anyway. I think for many people that should be a red flag. Whether they think it's well intentioned or not, the fact that you have a body outside the educational body for Scotland really driving home something, it's unprecedented. I don't think it's going to sit well with folks when they come to the realisation of that. But for many people, that I suppose it's just hogwash, mate. Without having a rant, it's truly hogwash.
Yeah, no, I don't, and I will say as well though, because obviously this is predicated allegedly on the recommendations that they put forth. There was only 6 of them. Hard to believe with all the waffle that was included within, but 6 recommendations. But honestly, it's a pattern that occurs with every group that gets put together and they provide recommendations. They're always accepted, always, literally all the fucking time. Which I think that goes a long way to show just how useless the Scottish government are. They don't actually put any thought into anything. They just accept everything that gets put their way. But I wanted to finish off on this. This is just one last thing because it was touched upon on the stream last night. Just for anybody that hasn't seen this, it was brought up at one point. I think it was Clive that brought it up initially. He made a question to if there was a hypothetical referendum in Scotland, would foreign nationals and refugees and whatnot get a vote? Well, according to what was unveiled in the referendum bill, that obviously that hasn't been accepted. So this is all predicated. And we're talking in hypotheticals here, but it just gives you a bit of insight as to what the SNP are intending if it occurs. The referendum bill itself is here. Don't need to really read the first page, but it's the second page here. I don't know if I can zoom in on this, can I? You wee dick. No, but I'll just read out this bit, right? So, entitlement to vote at the referendum qualifying foreign nationals. So it says the Referendum Act of 2020 applies for the purposes of determining entitlement to vote at the referendum, subject to the following modifications. Section 4D. I mean, this will be waffle for even it's waffle to me as well. But the thing that needs to be highlighted is it says the effect is for relevant citizen of the European Union. They were substituted to qualifying foreign nationals, right? And this is under the as I say, the entitlement to vote. Schedule 7, after the definition of qualifying address, they were inserted qualifying foreign national. I mean, it might sound like waffle, and the only reason that I'm talking is if I know what I'm talking about. Trust me, I don't really understand the way that these things are worded, but I read a few articles earlier on that were referencing this document, hence why I've got it up on the screen. But essentially, scratch beneath the surface of the fucking, the lawyer talk. And what they're talking about here is that if this bill is accepted, qualifying foreign nationals will be allowed to vote in the referendum. Now, the question that was obviously put yesterday, do you think Scots across the UK will be able to vote in that referendum? No. Foreign nationals here, probably European ones. I don't know if that is going to incorporate, people from in the international world, or if it's just going to be Europeans. But irrespective, European people voting in a referendum, of course they're going to want back in the EU. Of course they're going to want back in it. Well, not all, maybe, but most. Why wouldn't they? Yeah.
Here's the thing, though, mate. After the 2014 vote, for some time, probably still for many of the day, all the old pensioners go to blame it. Yous are to blame for us not having independence, right? So hypothetically, we'll say that there is a vote that comes, and the vote happens, and no wins again, and they look at the stats behind the no vote and just say by predominantly large part it's foreign nationals that vote no. Is the emphasis going to be on a turn that for pensioners to foreign nationals?
I don't know.
Because as it stands right now, it would be highly speculative to say what foreign nationals are going to be considered. I mean, there's people here that have been here that's non-EU for many, many years. So do they people not apply for a vote? It's like, where do you draw the line? If she does this, she's opened that whole can of worms, because there's Scots that have immigrated to Australia, to America, to Canada, to England, to fucking Denmark. So if there's people that aren't born here that don't have any ties here, and they're given a vote, then you should extend the vote to everybody. And if they don't, then that's going to be a conversation and a debate that I don't think the SNP would be able to look in the camera and say, we done it for reasons A, B, and C, because they know that they would never like to stand on.
Yeah. And I mean, they might as well just give the vote to everybody across the UK at that point. You know, it's a fucking difference. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this would just be in the context of European citizens or if this is just going to be a free-for-all, but I don't know. I mean, by their logic, the minute a Scotsman or a Scotswoman crosses that border and leaves this country, they're not Scottish anymore. They don't have a right. They don't have a right to say and have a say in this country, politically speaking. They're not Scottish. They don't live here. But I think they've got more of a right to have a fucking say, irrespective of whether or not they live here, because this is their country, this is where they come from, than somebody who could vote here, and if things go wrong, they can just fuck off back home. They've got no ties and allegiance to this nation, unless they like this dual, like those types are dual citizens, but they what's that word that they use where you kind of disregard your citizenship from one of the countries, and then you pledge your allegiance to Scotland. All right, okay, well, you've got more of an argument than somebody who can just piss off back to Germany or whatever. But I don't like that at all. I really don't. And again, it goes back to something that got me booted off BitChute for back in the day. But it's another step towards eradicating the differences between you and the foreigner and making it indistinguishable. Global citizenship. But I think on that note, I'm going to leave it at that because I gone for two and a half hours and covered everything we needed to cover. Showcased the yet again the heinous aspects of the latest anti-racism shit, where it seems to be again targeting the youth. And if you're living in Scotland and you've got kids in Scotland in school, I'd be paying more attention than you might not necessarily do. Not that I'm not saying you do. I'm not criticising anybody here, but by and large, a lot of people this is going under the radar. And I mean, I don't really know what the fuck to suggest at this point. Something's got to give. I don't know. But Rab, nice to see you, bud. But nice to see you. I love you and leave you, though. And on that note, Roy Batty, we'll catch you later as well, bud. Have you got anything else to say or plug before we go?
I will say this. On the 7th July, 3 days, I'm going to be on stream on John Davidson's channel with John. If folks want to come here, it's my take on a pamphlet I think he's making, a 10-point plan. And because of my Christian belief, he wants my views on a couple of things. So if you want to come here for an interesting listen, because I don't believe in a political solution, so it should make somewhat an interesting listen. If you fancy it, tune in. If not, that's fair enough. But I hope to see you on Sunday, usual time, usual place, and I wish you all well for the rest of the week.
Just before we go, I'm going to just sign that in the chat now because I didn't realise I'm all. I'll do that quickly before they go up. Mind you, they probably all started going already, but I'll do it anyway. But people, where is it? John Davidson. Fuck's sake, he's got his upcoming streams. Aye. There we go, wait. Upcoming live streams. There's it there, folks. I'll send it in the chat now. And after that, bid you farewell. So, is it there for anybody interested? I would recommend coming along with that. Like, give John some support. You know, it's always good to have other Scots. I highly encourage Scots to make their own channels and whatnot, do what they must. Good to have Scottish voices out there because I do believe that we're few and far between, really, it feels at times. But yeah, anyway, on that note, we'll catch you next time. Probably, next time I'll probably appear on stream will be next Sunday on Scott's Armour's channel. But on that note, adios.
Good night.